Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Emily, are you going to catch it or not? But how many times do I have to say it? The voice of the head nurse, Jennifer Jones, sounded. Emily flinched and, stopping looking out the window, hurried to do her boss's bidding. A job is a job is a job. Jennifer Jones, and who were you staring at? Emily, you were looking for a fiancé. I bet you were looking for a fiancé, weren't you? I'm right. Jennifer spoke up again. Emily, no, what do grooms have to do with it? I don't care about them right now. There's a man standing in the yard. He's been coming in for days, staring at the windows like he's waiting for something. Jennifer went to the window and smirked gloatingly. Jennifer Jones, but you're a piece of work. Emily, are you hallucinating or something? There's no man here. What if you don't want to work? Just say so. Why are you making up stories? Emily, mopping with a mop, said the young nurse. She looked out the window. The hospital courtyard was empty. Only the elderly janitor, John Smith, was sweeping the yard in his measured and leisurely rhythm. A swish, swish, swish rustle of the broom on the asphalt, and indeed, there was no one. But there was, and I know there was. Jennifer Jones just shook her head. Jennifer Jones, Emily's weird. She lives with her grandmother. She doesn't know much about her parents, either dead or something else. But they live in a small house in the suburbs and live in poverty. You don't have to be very smart to understand the reason Grandma is sick, and most of the money is spent on medicine. Jennifer stayed in the hallway a little longer, watching the nurse clean up, and then went to the nurse's station. What about her? Rumor had it that she was a favorite of the head of the department himself, Gregory Thompson. Gregory was a respected man, and no one in the clinic could not cross him, except the chief physician, and even then for business. Everyone else preferred to keep quiet. Why spoil relations with someone on whom your welfare and future career depended? If you cross him, you're in disfavor. Then you can forget about summer vacation and time off for time worked, unlike others. Jennifer knew how to approach Gregory without being embarrassed that he was married. What was there to be embarrassed about? People are adults. She wasn't as shallow as Emily. I can't believe she'd do something like that. Last week, Emily tried to throw dirty water on Gregory. The bucket slipped out of her hands or something, but she poured it all over the superintendent. How he screamed and shouted in his loud voice, and Emily just stood back and lowered her eyes. She was the simplicity of a saint. Emily was good at her job, though, and Jennifer had to admit it. But that was the end of her sympathy for her subordinate. Jennifer didn't like Emily. Oh, she didn't like her. You'd never know what was in that quiet pool of hers. Emily was a person with her own principles. You could expect anything from such a person. Of course, Emily didn't know this and could only guess why the head nurse disliked her. As she scrubbed the floors, she thought again about the strange creature she'd seen in the hospital courtyard. Had she imagined it? After all, Emily had seen that dog a couple days ago. It was a miracle, that's all. After changing the water for clean water once again, she went to clean the right wing of the building, where the so-called VIP rooms were located. Mostly wealthy people who had enough money to pay for more comfortable conditions and increased attention of the medical staff were treated here. Although, according to Emily herself, they were treated the same way as everyone else. And that means that all the privileges of the rich consisted only in these separate wards with TV, internet, and other benefits of civilization. Opening the door of the first room, Emily asked politely, "Mr. Johnson, can I mop the floors and wipe down the windowsills? I'll be quick. You won't even notice." The patient smiled. "Yes, of course. Do whatever you need to do, Emily. You're not bothering me at all." The orderly smiled back and, after thanking the patient for understanding, got to work. She knew that Robert Johnson was a businessman and, according to the superintendent, had an impressive amount of money. He could afford a lot of things. But Emily herself saw only a fixed sadness in his eyes. Mr. Johnson's illness was serious. Being around this pleasant-looking man, The nurse sincerely sympathized with him and wished him a speedy recovery. "Thank you. Buckle up," he said. "Say, what do we have outside our window today? Sunny or cloudy?" I'm really embarrassed to ask this, but I didn't have the strength to get out of bed at all. I feel so weak, but I don't know why yet. I can't really see the sun, but there seems to be some rays breaking through the clouds, Emily replied. Sunshine is good. Sunshine is life, Mr. Johnson nodded in agreement. Emily nodded and continued wiping the floor with a damp cloth. Disinfection and cleanliness were above all the key to health for both patient and healthcare provider. But Emily had no sooner cleaned half the room when the door opened, revealing a well-groomed woman in her 40s with a haughty expression. "Well, here we are cleaning again," the guest began instead of greeting. "Please tell me, may I come to my husband and be alone with him?" Emily looked at her with a hunted look and hurried out of the room. Everyone knew that Robert Johnson's wife, Violetta, was an extremely scandalous woman for whom it cost nothing to cause a scandal. "She's got a good thing going," Emily's partner, Nurse Jennifer, kept saying. "Maybe he'll die. That's a good thing. Maybe the rich guy will be gone, and she'll inherit the money." Emily never liked that kind of talk. Why should she count other people's money, go through their dirty laundry? "Don't you have anything else to do?" But her meeting with Violet Johnson had left her with the most contradictory feelings. The rich woman was too insolent and defiant. No, Emily yielded, of course, did not show her temper. What was she compared to Emily Williams? Yeah, there's a gulf between them that no bridge can bridge. I'll wait. Once she's gone, then I'll go into the room and go home, Emily thought. The voices of Robert Johnson and his wife could be heard through the tightly closed doors. Emily did not eavesdrop, of course, but waited patiently for the visitor to leave, unwillingly witnessing such an unpleasant conversation. Emily Williams felt extremely uncomfortable. It was mostly Emily who was trying hard to get her way. "Honey, why don't you want Michael to go?" "After all, he's your son too," my son Emily Williams said. "Emily, do you really think so? When did he become my son?" "Yes, I raised Mike since he was 15 years old, but my teaching didn't do him any good," Robert Johnson replied. "Last week he wrecked his new car again. A couple days before that, he got into a fight with a croupier at the casino. Is that what you think Johnson's son should be like, even if he's adopted?" Emily Williams bit her lip. Her husband, although he was ill, but still in verbal battles could shut up anyone. "Robert, but don't be so hard on Michael. You'll see, he'll change after this event," Emily insisted. "I'll be sure to talk to him." "How can your son only change in a bad way? I'm too scared to take phone calls. Every time I sit and wonder where they are calling from the police, hospital, or from the store, where he broke the window again." Robert Johnson objected tiredly, making it clear that he is very tired and wants to rest. But Emily Williams was not going to give up so easily. Instead, she again began to defend her son, whose problems have long had to solve her husband. Tired of waiting for Emily to leave the room, Emily went outside to chat with the janitor. "Good morning, John Say. Have you seen a dog around here? You know, a big one," light-colored Emily asked. "Hello, Emily. Why? Did you like him?" John Smith asked and looked at the nurse appraisingly, as if deciding whether to tell her the truth or not. "No, John the First called him Mickey." "Well, maybe he's not Mickey at all, of course. Homeless guy, you know. Alone, like a finger. I understand him." "A dog's a joy," the janitor added. "Where's Mickey's owner now?" Emily asked cautiously. "He's in intensive care, hit by a car in the street," John said. It was a quiet, inconspicuous street. "I was coming back from the store in the evening when some speeding driver drove by. They say he felt everything. He smashed the window and rushed to the owner. The paramedic from the ambulance said he lay down next to the owner and began to lick him with his tongue. Since then, the dog has been coming to the hospital, looking at the windows, hardy. I let him in my room out of the kindness of my heart. He's a house dog. He's not used to spending the night." Emily nodded sympathetically and looked at the janitor with respect. John Smith was a good man, simple but very kind-hearted. After talking some more, Emily walked to his back room and almost immediately saw a black nose sticking out of a gap in the doorway. "Mickey, you're so handsome," she exclaimed. The dog had sad eyes, like human eyes. Hearing the girl's voice, the dog came out of the janitor's den and gently touched her hand with his nose. "Good girl, faithful dog. Don't worry, your master will be fine. Our doctors are amazing. They'll have your master back on his feet before you know it." She patted the dog on the withers. Emily saw Emily Williams walk confidently out of the clinic building. A little farther away in the parking lot was her car. A car Emily would have had to save up for years, if not decades, to buy. "Well, now we can go back and clean the ward properly," she thought, and waved her hand to the janitor. "I don't miss me, John Smith. I still want to come back later. My grandmother wrapped me up such delicious pies for lunch." The dog walked Emily almost all the way to the front door and then back to the back room. Gregory Thompson greeted the orderly with a pleased smile. "Here Emily is back. Sorry about that." "Don't worry, Gregory Thompson. It's okay, I understand. Family is sacred," the businessman sighed sadly and thought for a moment. Feeling his attentive gaze, Emily was embarrassed and went back to cleaning. Gregory Thompson remained silent for a while, his brain doing some heavy analytical work. A couple of times he wanted to call Emily, but then he began to doubt the correctness of his conclusions. Finally, the businessman made up his mind, like a drowning man grasping at the last moment for a life-saving straw. "Emily, tell me, when is your vacation?" Gregory Thompson began from afar. "I don't know, probably December. Another 4 months to wait at least," she replied, intercepting her patient's gaze. Asked cautiously why Gregory Thompson coughed, but when he came to his senses, still answered the question. "I need your help, Emily. It just so happens that there's no one else to talk to but you. It sounds wild, but I want you to play the part of my daughter. For a little while, of course, and not for free." Emily's breath caught in her astonishment, and the bucket fell out of her hands, hitting the ward with a nasty metallic squeal. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No, it's not a joke. I'm sorry I started so soon. No time to prepare. You see, my new business partners are all family people. They like to go on outings together, leisure activities. They try to get to know all the background of the future partner, get to know the family members, spend time together before making a deal. What's that got to do with me?" "Gregory Thompson, where am I and where is the business?" Emily couldn't help herself. It was obvious from the businessman's face that he didn't like to rush and intended to lay it all out in front of his interlocutor, but only not at once, but gradually. "Emily, don't judge me harshly. Here's the thing. Investors intend to organize a corporate party for children and all employees after the deal. They'll rent a cottage on the riverbank, organize a disco, a party in general. According to their idea, it should unite everyone involved in the business project. It's the right move, of course. No one will have any thoughts of betrayal, yes. It's an interesting idea," Emily remarked with slight irony. Gregory Thompson smiled. At last he had succeeded in arousing her genuine interest. "All nice, but I have no one to send to the event. My stepson has completely lost his way. All he has on his mind are bars and girls. Even if I let him go to the party, he's bound to get drunk and fight with someone. So I thought I'd make up the story that I have a daughter. I mean, from my first marriage. You're gonna have a great time. They don't know you in the business world, and they're not likely to see the trick." "But why me?" Emily asked, hardly able to contain her excitement. "No, don't think anything of it, Mr. Johnson. But there are more worthy candidates. Hire someone from a staffing agency, for example." The businessman wiped the sweat from his forehead and leaned back on the pillow. Of course, he hadn't expected the conversation to be easy, but Emily had proven to be a tough nut to crack. Robert took a breath and continued the conversation with renewed vigor. "I don't like these agencies and model girls, Emily. They're all like dolls, as if they were artificial. And I need a man with a twist, not corrupted by money and all that. That's why I'm asking for your help. I'm about to have an operation. I don't know if I'm going to make it or not. Think about it. Don't be in a hurry to say no. With your bosses, I'll arrange to give you a vacation and not to oppose." After the words of the businessman, Emily smiled. It happened against her will. Mr. Johnson's proposal was very interesting. For a moment, she even imagined herself as the millionaire's daughter. The fantasy was attractive, and the girl did not hesitate to believe it. But Emily did not go further than her dreams and shook her head. No, Mr. Johnson, it is not for me. Among these rich people, I will be like a white crow. They'll notice the stark difference in my clothes, my hair, even my shoes. How can I go to this party? But Robert Johnson was not in vain considered an experienced negotiator and immediately caught a shadow of doubt in the voice of the nurse. You see, you have to decide here and now, he continued to persuade. Don't worry, Emily. I'll provide you with money. We'll buy dresses not worse than the others. We'll do your hair, manicure, pedicure, whatever you want. But you have to help me. I don't know how it's going to go. Maybe the surgery won't help me. And I can't count on Michael not getting drunk. I can't rely on Emily Williams. She only thinks about her son. She thinks he's always being hurt. And I want what's best for him. At this rate, he's going to grow up to be an alcoholic. And then what? He'll blow my business away. And then he'll sell my real estate. I don't want that. You know, I'm sorry. You can call it a freak show, can't you? But as soon as I saw you, I knew you were the best candidate. Emily's cheeks flushed, and a sweet smile played on her lips. What can be said, but compliments are always pleasant, especially from such a representative man as Mr. Johnson. In principle, I don't mind. Only with work problems, I'm unlikely to be released. My partner, Lisa, is always sick and often takes a vacation at her own expense, but the staff is not supposed to have more people. So I have to take care of 2 people. If the head nurse will allow, the head of the department will certainly wrap up my petition. Emily, the nurse, said sadly, leave it up to me. They'll deal with the head nurse and the head of the ward. It's a lot to take in. I've done good for this clinic. It's the 3rd year they've allocated funds for repairs and new equipment. You see, the hospital is in trouble. Now I'm afraid I'll never get out of here. Emily immediately waved her hands in protest. Oh, come on, come on, come on. You've got your whole life ahead of you, Robert Johnson. But the businessman only grinned bitterly. Come on, you can say that too. That's not the point. Emily, I wish there weren't any VIP rooms here. I wish there were rooms like mine in every ward, in every hospital building. Oh, I wish I was cured. I could do it in a heartbeat. Emily had barely opened her mouth to reply when Emily Williams, the head nurse, entered the room. But you're missing somewhere. How long do we have to do this? Who's going to clean the corridor? Do you know? Personally, I don't want that kind of work for nothing. You do realize that if Gregory Thompson sees a speck of dust anywhere, he'll be sure to give them all a kick in the ass. Meeting his eyes with the head nurse, Robert Johnson smiled meaningfully and said quietly, Don't shout like that, Emily Williams. In fact, I have a favor to ask of you. Please give it to Gregory Thompson personally. At the mention of the superintendent, the head nurse visibly tensed. But the businessman was quick to reassure. I need Emily to be given a full vacation, although a week is fine with us. But it must be done as soon as possible, because I can't wait any longer. He raised an eyebrow in surprise. What vacation? Who's going to work? That's not my problem. But if Gregory Thompson says no, I'll talk to the head doctor, and I'll take her word for it at that level, Robert replied. Emily Williams looked at the young nurse with hatred, signaling that the conversation was over, but she refrained from further comment, realizing that she now had a powerful advocate. Wishing Robert a good day, the head nurse left the room, slamming the door. Lastly, I was filled with anger and resentment toward this young upstart whom I had disliked from the first day I met her. What did he see in her? If Robert weren't so sick, I'd think he was trying to make a lover of her. Only now the rich man is as good as dead. Well, I'll have to call LA and tell them what's going on. Let them keep an eye on their husband to make sure he doesn't make a mess of things, Jennifer Jones thought on her way to the head of the department. Gregory Thompson, after listening to the nurse, granted the businessman's request almost immediately. The far-sighted doctor was well aware that Robert Johnson had done a lot of good and could now count on a reciprocal favor from the management. Gregory Thompson was not stupid at all and immediately calculated the situation a couple of moves ahead. Because of the fact that if the entrepreneur now outraged, Robert will appeal directly to the chief physician, who will still fulfill his request. But Gregory, for his stubbornness, will get a good reprimand and maybe even lose the VIP palaces. the proceeds of which went into his pocket. "All right, Jennifer will tell Robert Johnson that I'll sign off on this and make sure it's done to the best of my ability," he said dryly, and pointed the nurse with a glance toward the door. It all looked as if things had been over between them for a long time. There was no such thing as an affair on the side. Tears welled up in the corners of the head nurse's eyes. This wasn't the kind of treatment Jennifer wanted. All the more so because she had a very close and stormy relationship with Gregory Thompson. Stepping out into the hallway, she immediately pulled her cell phone out of her robe pocket and dialed Robert's wife's number. "Hello? But listen, what happened to mine? I guess he wants to be alone again," Emily asked Stephen. "Where's he going to go?" "There's another thing going on. I don't know what's gotten into Robert's head at all. Only he intends to send our new girl Emily to some event as an orderly what kind of nurse. She's just from out of town. Isn't she by any chance the one who had to mop the ward floors today with a bucket and a rag, with a contemptuous curl of her lips?" Emily asked. "Well, yes, that's the one. I don't know what she's saying to him, only he's going to nominate her for the ladies. So you're going to have to figure it out, all right. All right, take it easy. I can't talk to you anymore." "Do you realize that? I've got work to do," Jennifer replied, and hung up. Emily thought for a moment. To tell the truth, she had expected her husband to assign and send her stepson Michael to meet the children of her future partners. The cunning woman realized that at this event her son would be able to make useful acquaintances and establish himself as the future face of the company. Emily realized that Robert didn't have long to live, and he might not survive the upcoming surgery, which meant she should have forged iron while it was still hot. Emily's thoughts flowed in only one direction, one that favored her and no one else. Emily returned home. Robert would be gone today or tomorrow, and then who would take over the firm? A woman at the head of the company. That's not a bad thing. But business is a serious business, and they don't like women very much. And it's no big deal that Michael did time when he was young. Who doesn't? We're all sinners. Robert seems to have had his share of trouble in his younger days, and now he's pretending to be a righteous man. In a state of anxious reflection, Emily was brought out by the voice of her son, who approached her from behind. "Mom, give me some money. The card just ran out, and unlimited Robert took it. We're going out with the boys tonight." Emily turned around and looked at him reproachfully. "Michael, I'll give you the money, of course, but you could do with a little less divorce, because Robert's got an interesting combination in mind. Remember that party I told you about? There's going to be all sorts of events down by the river." "But I do. So what?" Michael grumbled unhappily. Emily Williams looked at her son with a triumphant look. "So that instead of you, Robert thought of sending some nurse instead of you. Can you believe it?" But she looked like a redneck. Very simple, her lips bowed and her hair in a braid. She's like a milkmaid from the backwoods. God, I can't believe he'd go for her. There was a shadow on Michael's face. He won't calm down, Robert. He's at it again. Well, he won't be gone long. Anyway, I think it's time to think about a will. Why don't you get a notary to take him to see what's going on? You know, it happens, businessmen like our father, as soon as anything, immediately give their property to orphanages or hospitals. Come on. I don't think so, said Emily Williams. Robert's not stupid. Michael grinned wryly. What do you think? You know how much money he spent on homeless shelters and dog shelters? Those, what's their name? Animal shelters. Emily Williams frowned. Her son's words had clearly struck a nerve. Digging in her purse, she pulled out an old notebook in which she found the number of a lawyer she knew. She briefly outlined the situation to the notary over the phone. She asked him for a favor, to draw up a will with a visit to the address. Is Robert Johnson really that bad? He was supposed to have an operation, so why all the fuss and fuss? Asked the elderly lawyer. Your words to God's ears. There's no telling how this operation will end, said Emily. What to say if Robert himself does not believe in it, and the doctors are also afraid that if you do not do the operation, he will not be long. So it's a do or die situation. Okay, Emily, I hear you. We'll be there on time, but I'll call you beforehand, the notary said dryly. In his heart, he was shocked by the news about Robert. He had known him for a long time, and had thought of him as a strong, determined man. and now it appeared that he had nothing left to live for. How unfair life can be, especially to those who least deserve it, the notary thought, and began to pack up after the conversation. Not even 10 minutes later, Emily was summoned to the head of the department. "Oh, I'm going to get another scolding because of Robert's request. Oh, and will arrange it to me now," thought the girl with longing. But to Emily's amazement, Gregory Thompson not only approved her request for a vacation, but also gave a month's rest instead of the promised week. "Thank you very much. I'll work it off," the young nurse whispered. But Gregory Thompson just waved her off, signaling that his mission was over. Lying on the hard hospital bed, Robert Johnson stared at the ceiling and thought about how best to introduce Emily to his companions. Like any prudent man, Robert Johnson realized that no one would check his words, because in their environment it is considered a sign of bad taste. But still, it was necessary to take into account all the details, especially Emily's character, and the fact that she had never been to this kind of event. Mentally thinking over each point, Robert made notes in his notebook so he wouldn't forget this or that detail. He had never done this sort of thing before, but after his illness he had grown different and had lost much of his strength by the time he was in his 50s. Robert was sure it was extremely difficult to surprise him with anything in his life, but when Emily Williams reappeared in the room, the amazement of the businessman exceeded all permissible limits. True, now the wife came not alone, but together with Michael and lawyer John Smith. "Well, darling, I brought the notary. Don't be sorry, but this is a serious matter. You know I have to. Surgery, treatment, you know how big the risks are. Would you make a will? You never know. Just so there's no problems later. Otherwise, if something happens, you'll be completely out of it. No, of course you live longer, but this will. I will then in the fireplace to burn myself personally, not the least bit embarrassed by what was said," announced Emily Williams. Robert Johnson looked at the notary and saw the embarrassment in his eyes. However, there was a certain sense in his wife's words, and it would be foolish to pretend that this was not the case. The thoughts in Robert's head were spinning at breakneck speed, processing an inconceivable number of operations per second. An inner voice kept telling him, calling to his mind and forcing him to look at the situation from different angles. "That's who I should write my will to, but not Michael. He's fluffing his feathers, looking at me like he's already buried me. He's just waiting to take my chair as soon as possible," thought the businessman, and turned his gaze to Emily Williams. Spouse also did not cause a lot of confidence. All the same woman, she was a squabbling and more than anything in the world loved restaurants and beautiful life. This is he, Robert Johnson, a former engineer of the plant for the manufacture of reinforced concrete structures. Wore ordinary clothes and did not strive for ostentatious luxury and expensiveness. The businessman had a cheap watch, and he loved sales, which, according to one famous person, showed the same time as a watch bought for $1 million. Still, whatever the case, the will had to be made out to Emily Williams. To give everything to Michael at Robert simply did not rise to the hand. At the same time, the businessman was aware that after his death, his wife will still transfer some of the assets to his son by right of blood relationship with Robert Johnson. "I think you've thought this through properly. So put your signature here, and I, in turn, will probate your will and be obliged to remain silent," John Smith summarized, sweat beading on his forehead. To be honest with himself, he could not remember a time when Robert Johnson had looked so bad. In the months of his illness, the businessman had shrunk to nearly half his size and lost weight. His cheeks had slumped, and his once strong, powerful body was completely devoid of relief muscles, and only Robert's eyes radiated warmth. They looked at the world with genuine interest, inherent in his inquisitive mind. Having signed the will, the businessman realized that he had crossed the Rubicon and burned all bridges behind him. Now, if he does not recover from the operation, his entire business will eventually pass into the hands of his daughter, Emily Williams, although he could easily transfer some of the property to distant relatives, whom, however, never seen. But only just the sense in this he did not see with all his desire, and Robert was also unbearably painful to look at the joyful smile of the stale face of his wife, who literally blossomed before his eyes. At some point, Emily Williams even seemed to him a kind of energy vampire, feeding on his energy, and he expected from day to day to go to the next world. But Emily, of course, did not know all this and mentally tuned herself for the coming vacation. Well, a week or two, and the event that Robert Johnson told her about. I'll spend the rest of the time with my grandmother. She hardly ever sees me. She misses me a lot from work, and I'll be able to take the dog. He's a very good dog, and he's a good dog to have in the house. The rest of the shift flew by, and before Emily left, as promised, she stopped by Robert Johnson's room. Despite a strong dose of medication, the businessman was still awake and eagerly awaited her arrival. So, did it all work out, Emily? Robert Johnson, it worked out just fine. I've been given a month's vacation. Well, I told you, I've got this legend in my notebook. What you'll have to say at the event. I've left a little man on the payroll. She will help you get used to it and will help you with the purchase of clothes, said the businessman. Robert Johnson, thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have dreamed of this. He smiled. He liked talking to Emily more and more. If he could lose 20 to 25 years, he would definitely go after this beautiful woman, whose soul glowed with the kindness and inner energy that filled her. The thought of it made Robert feel inexpressibly cozy and warm, making him immediately want to sink into the embrace of morphine. As soon as Emily left the clinic building, she was immediately called by John Smith. Here's the thing. I don't know how to say this. Anyway, Master Mickey passed away today. He, poor thing, as if he sensed it, began to howl so drearily. I locked him in the back room. Of course. Otherwise, I might have gotten the chief of medicine at last, but it's not a good idea to keep him here. He's gonna wither away. Why don't you come to LA with me? You know, for a while. You live in a private house. It'd be easier on you. Otherwise, he's smart, he's not naughty, he asks to go outside when he needs to. Emily looked sadly at the dog, who sat at John Smith's feet with his head down. What if he doesn't go? I can't drag him by force. I'm sorry, John, but I don't think Mickey will go. You don't even think about it. Did he like her? I knew right away I had to be gentle with him and pet his ear a lot. That's what animals expect. They, like people, need support and understanding, the janitor said confidently. Emily smiled and gently waved her finger at Mickey. Come on, come to me. The dog reluctantly got up and then came over to the girl and started sniffing her hands. Emily gasped in amazement. Oh, I forgot about that. Who promised you Grandma's pies? Take one with cabbage and one with potatoes. But if you don't like it with cabbage, I'll eat it myself on the way. You go with the potatoes. Take the beer and treats with you. Sure, don't forget. She's still a little homesick, but she seems to listen to you. So take Emily and don't hesitate. She thought for a moment, then stroked Mickey's scruff and led him toward the exit from the hospital yard. The dog followed obediently, as if he'd known Emily for months or even years. When Tamara Ivanovna saw her granddaughter with a huge dog on the threshold, she recoiled in fright. Oh, granddaughter, who have you brought? Don't be afraid, Grandma. It's Mickey, a pet dog. His master was hit by a car the other day. So he's here now. Anyway, the owner was gone, and the dog was pining and started howling under the clinic's windows. I had to take him back. Look at him. I thought that only happened in the movies. Well, if that's the case, let him live. What are we, not human beings? We'll survive somehow, won't we? We're not the last piece of food, said Tamara Ivanovna, just like John Smith said. Mickey behaved calmly at home and almost immediately found a comfortable place near the door next to the food bowl. The dog refused to eat that day, and the rest of the evening he whined softly, like a wolf scratching at the door with his paw. But toward nightfall, Mickey calmed down and fell into an uneasy canine sleep. The next morning, Emily awoke earlier than usual and began to study her fictional biography, which Robert Johnson had sketched out fluently for her. In fact, the legend was quite simple and boiled down to the fact that from an early age, Emily lived with her mother and grandmother in the province, and after graduating from high school decided to find her father and tell him about her existence. The story, invented by Robert Johnson, looked quite logical and had almost no rough edges in the modern world. What doesn't happen? and even the appearance of heirs from the first marriage no longer surprises anyone. After thinking for a while, Emily called the phone number given to the businessman, and in a minute she was on a video call with a woman who called herself Jennifer Jones as. It turned out a little later. She worked as a secretary at Robert Johnson's company and had known him for years. The employee was faithful, loyal, and knew more about fashion and etiquette than anyone else. At the same time, Emily Williams was instructing Michael on how to handle the situation. "Son, you would follow Jennifer's secretary to your father's. Chances are Robert will enlist her services and ask for her help. Don't you dawdle. They're probably going to the beauty parlor. This is the address. You get in there and tell the girls to take this stuffed animal. A vegetable garden, all right? Say hello from me. They've been feeding off me for a long time, so I guess they won't do anything bad by hurting this village. They'll just avoid it by a mile." His mother's voice about saying hello to Michael pleased him a lot, especially after hearing about his stepfather's action. "But that's okay. Hang in there, Robert. You'll be sorry. Oh, you'll be sorry." Out of sight, Michael had always treated his stepfather with contempt and hatred, calling his stepfather a poor engineer. He saw him as the root of all his troubles, as if it was Robert who got behind the wheel drunk or hit an innocent croupier. About Michael's father, Emily told little, but among the business elite rumors that he got involved with crime and stepped on a slippery slope. But neither Robert nor his stepson knew the main thing. All this time, Emily faithfully met with her ex-husband, considering him the standard of a man and alpha male. After all, to lead a normal married life with George was simply impossible. Where was it? Emily's whole life would instantly shrink to the size of the eye of a needle, when she would have to worry about only one thing: how to collect her husband a huge transfer to prison and pay his next card debt. Robert was another matter, smart, intelligent, wealthy. True, Emily had no feelings for him at all, but that's all right. You can't eat love alone, as they say. Emily had a backup on that score, George. Time-tested and ruthless, like an exiled lone wolf. Emily had seen him in her late husband's place beside Michael. Experience, strength, wisdom, and youthful exuberance, the perfect union. George would quickly nail all competitors to the nail. Emily and George had been seeing each other more and more lately, as if anticipating the imminent denouement caused by Robert's possible death. How is he still alive? He's in great health, George asked every time they met. Emily only shook her head. Of course he is. Do you think I'd keep such a thing from you? Ridiculous. As soon as Robert goes, the whole town was buzzing like an alarmed beehive. Be patient. It won't be long now. This operation will be his last. George gritted his teeth. But if he had his way, he would have sent that rich man to the grave long ago. He'd tried to tinker with the rich guy's tires or fix the brakes, but it was no use, but to no avail. Once I even tried to burn down his country house, but it didn't work. The fire department happened to be nearby. The fire only touched the wall of the house and was quickly extinguished by a lot of water from the hoses. No matter how hard George tried, it was no use. The businessman behaved as if nothing had happened, as if not noticing the attempts on his life. And then, desperate, George turned to a fortune teller. There were strange rumors that she could do anything. So George decided to take this desperate step, even though he was a recidivist with a strong spirit. But when he got to the fortune teller's house, he got cold feet. Jessica looked to be in her early 50s. She had all the trappings of a fortune teller: brooches, balls, medium, and other tinsel. After listening to the visitor, Jessica asked the bandit to give her a photograph of the person she wanted to cast a spell on. George, anticipating such a question, readily handed her a picture of Robert. The fortune teller's face grew serious. The fingers of her hand clenched so that they involuntarily crumpled the photograph, tearing its edges. "Are you having a seizure or something?" George asked anxiously then. But Jessica only shook her head and said she needed time. There will be a result for sure. Otherwise, I won't give you money up front. Don't get your hopes up, George growled. The fortune teller nodded in agreement, and George ran out of her house, drenching himself in cold sweat. Then, of course, he cheated. He'd cheated, and he'd never paid any money for her services. She'll get by. She's used to living off other people's money, George thought, happy that, after the right Robert Johnson, literally withers before his eyes. And while the hapless lover of Emily Williams, George, waited for the departure of the businessman in the next world, Emily clearly followed his instructions and prepared for an important event. Jennifer's help in this matter was simply invaluable. Watching Emily try on one dress after another, Jennifer couldn't hold back a cute smile. It seemed that the young attendant was ready to rake the whole store. To her slender figure, any marginally acceptable outfit looked simply gorgeous. "All we need is a coachman and a pumpkin carriage," Emily said admiringly, looking at her reflection in the mirror. "That's all right. There's more to come." "You'll have a carriage and a coachman," Jennifer replied. Everything was going well until Emily went to the beauty parlor to get her hair done. That's where the trouble started. First, she got a manicure, painting her nails a disgusting swampy color. The girl wanted to be indignant, but the master immediately assured her that such a color scheme is now in fashion. Swallowing her resentment, Emily sat down in the hairdresser's chair, and then she was met with the biggest disappointment of her life. All she wanted was a little styling, to turn the ends of her hair into the curls she'd loved since she was a little girl. But instead, Emily was persuaded to dye her hair. That's where the main trap awaited her. By cleverly switching the dye, the master dyed her hair in such a color that Emily covered her eyes with her hands in horror. "God, what have you done? Why did my hair look like an alien's? Is this how I'm going to go to the meeting now?" Barely holding back tears, Emily exclaimed. Unfortunately, Jennifer was not around at that moment because she urgently went to the clinic where Robert Johnson was already being prepared for surgery. "And if you want, we can recolor." "I'm sorry such a simple dye job got mixed up. Human error, you know," the manageress, who had received detailed instructions a couple hours ago, said icily. "I don't have time for anything, don't you see? I've got to leave for a meeting in half an hour." In one breath, Emily blurted out and left the hated salon. In the fresh air, the color of her hair seemed even more shocking, making passers-by stop and point their fingers at her in amazement. And knowing the address where the meeting was to take place, Emily called a cab and waited for the car. In the meantime, Michael, choking with laughter, was telling his mother the latest news. "Well done, son. You knew you wouldn't fool me. Now let that hillbilly try to get away with it. And the girls from the salon, a special thanks to pass on that I will not forget this service. Also, I don't think you're going to stop halfway through. It's not puppies to drown." Pampering the body with made-up porridge, Emily Williams said with a smile. 5 minutes ago, she received a call from Gregory Thompson, informing her that Robert Johnson was being prepared for surgery, which meant that the inheritance would not be long in coming. Having heard such curious news from his ex-wife, George rubbed his hands together. Hopefully, tomorrow he will be able to see Emily Williams without hiding. Emily had to drive for about 40 minutes before the driver did not bring to a huge cottage, located a couple hundred meters from the riverbank. The estate was surrounded on 3 sides by dense forest, and the gate and front door were just facing the river itself. "Wow, what a beauty!" Emily marveled involuntarily, forgetting for a moment the discomfort of her hair. A real rich man's paradise. Of course. They say it has 2 swimming pools, a tennis court, a bar, and a dance floor. An elderly cab driver who had stopped at the very gate obligingly chimed in. "Here we are. If you need me to pick you up from here, call me. I'll rush over any time." Emily nodded and held out the money. The massive gate was unlocked, and soon the girl was on the grounds of the manor, which looked like a miniature city for entertainment. In the courtyard were already standing several young men who had arrived a little earlier than Emily. Seeing her unusual hairstyle, they immediately expressed their admiration. Wow, a real fashion challenge. No more clichés and standards. Emily's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she tensed, expecting to be taunted. But the rich kids were friendly and didn't even think of mocking the new girl. On the contrary, they expressed their admiration for her taste and her peculiar challenge to society. Emily relaxed, smiled, and soon found herself in a very cozy environment where her wealthier peers were enjoying life and partying to the fullest. Outwardly, there was no difference between them. Just a group of young people who, by the will of their parents, found themselves in such a paradisiacal place. Emily danced, made new acquaintances, and rested her soul as she had never rested before. Young people were swimming in the river, riding on catamarans and jet skis and building sand castles a couple of meters from the water's edge. She felt happy, not even realizing that, at that very moment, a tipsy Michael was heading toward the country mansion. The impudent major was literally bursting with self-esteem and the desire to tell everyone the truth. Michael literally burst into the party like an angry beast. Climbing onto the stage, he grabbed the microphone and thundered at the top of his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please have your attention for a moment. You are about to hear some very exciting news. There is a shapeshifter and a liar among us. A man who is pretending to be someone else. Or rather, another Emily turned pale and froze in shock. Michael kept talking and talking, feeling himself the master of the situation. His words caused a great resonance among young people, from which she again became the object of everyone's attention. This time, however, no one admired her. On the contrary, kind, smiling people looked at Emily with judgment. All their appearance showed that they did not want to communicate with a deceiver. Tears streamed down her cheeks, burning her skin with salty rivulets. The bitterness of shame tore at her soul. She thrashed about like a caged animal. Suddenly she wanted freedom. To be alone with herself and cry until her eyes were red with tears. God, what a shame. Why had she agreed to this? Her feet carried her toward the river. The hooting and hollering followed. She stubbornly walked forward toward the water that would cool her heated soul. Now just a little more, and the water will wash away all the dirt of lies and deceit, as an incantation whispered Emily, whose consciousness, in fact, beat and covered with a shroud of sticky fog. Suddenly, somewhere behind her back, she heard the exasperated scream of Jennifer Jones, who had jumped out of the car and was running toward her, kicking off her shoes. "Emily, stop. Don't. Wait. Honey, you have to know that. Don't go. Robert Johnson left you a will and rewrote the whole business." Emily flinched and slowly turned around. The water had reached almost to her chest when Jennifer tugged on her arm with force. "Honey, come on, come on. You don't know anything." Robert Johnson outplayed everyone. "What's that got to do with the inheritance? Is he dead? And what do I need his business for?" Perplexed, Emily shook her head. With the fact that Emily Williams, along with her lover, wanted to kill him. Even if the operation had been successful, his days would have been numbered. And all because of that ill-fated fortune, Jennifer blurted out in one breath. The secretary's words didn't make anything clearer to Emily. Her ears were still ringing with the taunts of the rich men who'd chased her away from their private. Her heart was beating like crazy, and it wasn't until a little later, when it was announced that Robert Johnson had safely undergone surgery, that Jennifer explained to Emily what was going on. It all started with a fortune teller, the same Jessica, who ironically turned out to be Robert's classmate and remembered him as a kind and honorable man. Naturally, she did not cast any spoil because she did not do it in principle. She always remained kind. And evil she simply passed by, pretending that the ritual is observed. But in the case of Robert, fortune teller could not remain an indifferent witness and honestly told him about his enemies. At that moment in the mind of the businessman put together all the pieces of the puzzle. And the accident on the road, when he miraculously survived, and burned country house, where he was saved by firefighters. Unfortunately, at that point Robert could not identify his enemy and continued to believe his wife and stepson. But when Jessica identified the repeat offender George in one of the photos, everything fell into place. In this old family photo, Emily Williams was standing in an embrace with her first husband George shortly before he received his first prison sentence. That's when Robert realized that a smart and calculating three-headed criminal from Los Angeles was working against him. Their son Michael, realizing that he will not be left alone, the businessman decided to send to the party. He liked it nurse Emily having made a will for her. It was for this reason that Anthony left the beauty parlor so hastily to secretly bring notary Simon Lewis to make amendments to the will. All this was done half an hour before the operation, which Robert Johnson did not even hope to survive. The businessman's calculation turned out to be as simple as anything ingenious. He bequeathed the firm's assets to a complete stranger. Robert deliberately took himself out of harm's way, because in this case, his death would have no meaning for Emily Williams and George. Of course, he was taking a risk, and a big one at that. He had seen a lot of good people in his life, and he had immediately identified the traits inherent in their values. Before making this combination, Robert had made inquiries about the young nurse and realized that she was exactly the person he needed. As it happens, Robert has been unable to have children his entire life. It's a heavy burden on his shoulders. Believing that, he happily married her, dreaming of being a father to her teenage son, Michael. But time passed, and the stepson became increasingly promiscuous and violent, taking the best from his biological, recidivist father, George. Many then condemned Robert for the fact that he never decided to take a child from an orphanage and bring him up the way he should. The businessman was simply cowardly, afraid of responsibility, doubting his own strength and capabilities. And only when he was on the threshold of death, Robert realized that it is no longer possible to live like this. In his mind, he buried himself long ago. But still, before his possible passing into the next world, he wanted to do something good. For this very reason, he bequeathed everything to Emily, being sure that this money will bring her real happiness. But fate had it differently. Robert not only underwent surgery, but also slowly went on the mend. Seeing in the ward classmate Jessica, he was very surprised. "Here I came to check on you. You don't know I've been praying for your health all this time. I am a professed do-gooder and have never done what is attributed to me intercepting the businessman's gaze," the guest said. "Thank you, Jessica." "That was very helpful to me," Robert replied. The chamber door opened, and a smiling Emily appeared on the threshold. True, this time the young orderly was no longer carrying the bucket and mop so familiar to her. "Well, hello. Daddy, that's what I should call you now," Robert Emily joked and sat down on the edge of the bed. During the time the businessman was in rehab, a lot had happened. First, Robert filed for divorce, entrusting this process to his lawyer. He also refused to help his son Michael when he got into another drunk accident. But when police officers studied the sect footage, it turned out that it was Michael who hit a pensioner on an inconspicuous street a few weeks ago. Ironically, this kindly grandfather turned out to be the owner of Mickey, who was sheltered out of pity by Emily. I don't believe in coincidence after that. I could have refused Robert's offer not to take Mickey, and she remarked to Jessica. "Yeah, I had a crush on Robert myself in my high school years. I couldn't see the bills running after him. He was overweight by nature, but blood and milk, you know. That's what they call a good guy. I thought he didn't like me after graduation, got depressed, suffered a lot, even thought about suicide. But then I discovered my abilities. You see, after how many years, still saved Robert, and now I will never let go." Tears glistened in the corners of Emily. Such a touching story she had never heard, and is unlikely to hear. After all this happened, Robert Johnson began to call Emily a daughter, joking about the fact that from now on she is a rich heiress. "Oh, come on, I can't take it. I'm applying to the economics department by correspondence. Maybe I'll learn something. And if I don't, you can help me." Robert Johnson put one arm around Jessica's shoulders and the other pulled Emily close to him. "You know, just invite me to the wedding as soon as possible. Why did I let you go to that party for nothing? You probably got your eye on someone else, too, huh? Honestly, I can see it in your eyes that you're attracted to someone, can't you?" Emily smiled. "That's right. You were right on the money. There's this guy I like. His name's Kevin. You know, he's the only one who didn't laugh at me when Michael threw mud at me on stage. And he says he fell in love with my hair. Can you believe it? The one that's pink as a boat. What am I supposed to do now? I don't know what to do." Robert Johnson probably hadn't laughed so loudly since his childhood in the slums of Los Angeles. He was echoed by Jessica and Barbara, whose infectious laughter showed all her granddaughters of deities, stage and music. Emily herself was laughing, too, with Mickey's nose in her hand as he became a full-fledged member of their newly happy family.
Emily didn't say a word. "It's free." She heard a woman's voice bring her back to reality. "Yes," the girl replied absent-mindedly and set her bag on the floor. An older woman sat next to her, her hands folded in her lap. She sighed sadly as the train started and took them forward through the gray spring landscapes of fields and forest. The passengers got to talking on the way, and after entering the city, Emily helped an elderly woman carry her heavy bags to the bus stop. She had come from the village to visit relatives, but no one had met her. Emily looked sadly at the departing bus. She felt sorry for the lonely old woman, though she was no less lonely herself. At least she had a place to go. And the girl in this city, no one would give her a corner for nothing. However, such travels through the cities of the region, one could say, had already become a habit during the last months when she was traveling in search of income and housing. She was hired to work at markets selling vegetables and fruit, as a dishwasher, at least for the time of sick leave and short vacations, as a janitor. And if she was lucky, a minor. She didn't stay anywhere for long, and she was glad of any opportunity to get some money to pay for room and board. Even that seemed a good life compared to what she'd had before. Still in her nightmares, she saw the endless field, the searing sun that made dark spots appear before her eyes, and her aunt's, "Who else would want you but me? Yeah, anyone would have kicked you out on the street a long time ago," her squeaky voice echoed in my head. "Next stop," announced the conductor, and the childhood memories dissipated. She went in search of work at the warehouses, car washes, and gas stations on the outskirts of town. Among them were diners and diners where she could also try her luck. My shoes were soaked, my bag was weighing down on my shoulders, but there was nowhere to go. She had to find something for the day, otherwise she would be homeless tomorrow. Mostly they refused politely and quietly. But at one of the car washes, the receptionist, for some reason, took her for a beggar and shouted in front of the other employees, "Get out of here. It's fashionable to walk around. I will not give you any work. You'll steal something else or worse." The driver, who had come to pay, looked at Emily, and she felt very uncomfortable. He was holding a cup of coffee in a paper bag with a brownie he'd just bought at the local buffet. The girl hadn't eaten anything since this morning. "Sorry," she hurriedly said, and quickly walked outside. It felt like she had just been doused in slop. How she hated her poverty at this moment. And she was not asking for alms, but wanted to earn an honest living. "Can I give you a ride?" came a man's voice from somewhere. "What?" Emily was confused. "And if you can, that would be great. Get it." It was the same man she'd run into at the car wash. A few minutes ago, driving by, he had stopped and looked out the open window. Once inside the car, Emily felt uncomfortable for the second time. The interior was clean, modern, and smelled very pleasantly of fragrance and expensive men's perfume. The girl even looked shyly at the driver and pondered to herself why he had stopped. Pity, an unpleasant thought flashed through her head. "Where do you want to go? To the nearest hostel of some kind, the cheapest one?" the man asked. The man turned on the navigator and used it to find the right address. Emily was angry at herself for having bypassed so few organizations and was afraid that tomorrow she would suffer the same fate. "Are you looking for a job?" the new acquaintance asked, either noticing the passenger's sad face or just out of politeness. "Yes," she replied faintly. "And what do you do for a living?" he asked, pulling up outside a gray, unassuming building labeled hostel clerk dishwasher, basically whatever they'll take. "Thank you very much." She was about to leave, but the man suddenly perked up. "Do you have a medical book?" "Yes, my name is Jason." He held out his hand. "And I'm Emily," she replied, a little surprised. "Emily, if you're looking for a job, why don't you go as a dishwasher at a restaurant? I have an employee who left unexpectedly due to illness, and the season is about to start. And there's a lot to do. Looking for someone new is always a problem." "Oh wow," Emily was completely confused. "Interesting. Write down my number. Come back tomorrow for an interview." "I don't have a phone. I'll write it down on a piece of paper." Jason dictated the address and left. Emily paid for a place in the hostel for the night, showered, and snacked on the bun she'd kept in her bag all day to eat when she got unbearably hungry. Finally, she crawled under the covers. Luckily, the room was barely occupied, and the two roommates were lying quietly in their beds, staring into their phones. And why would he do that? Emily asked herself, stroking her stomach. Her thoughts darted from one extreme to the other. At first, the girl was sure the man was a con artist, tricking naive fools into doing something illegal. Why? I only told him about the phone. Now he'll think that no one will even look for me in case of anything, she chastised herself. Then she suddenly imagined a beautiful, clean restaurant where the food smelled warm and delicious. She wanted to go there and eat to her heart's content with that pleasant feeling. The image of the casual acquaintance changed dramatically. Now he seemed like a kind and helpful person. Maybe he really needs a dishwasher urgently. He felt sorry for me and found out that I was looking for just such a job. So he offered it to me. What's the big deal? It's worth a shot. After all, washing dishes in a restaurant is still better than selling at the market. But think about it, she continued her inner dialogue as she fell asleep. She was determined that tomorrow she would go to the address and try to get a job. The morning was rainy and overcast. Her shoulders and legs were aching unpleasantly after yesterday's adventures. Emily, hello. Jason greeted her as she entered his office. Come on in, have a seat. Hello. Emily replied, once again feeling awkward. Her companion was sitting in his chair with his legs apart, the top buttons of his white shirt undone, and she noted to herself that he was quite handsome. Ready to get started in the next few days. I have a lot of guests in my kitchen right now. See, the thing is, I'm pregnant. There was a momentary pause, but it seemed to Emily that Jason had been silent for too long, and she was about to get up and leave. He didn't seem to be thinking of kicking her out, though. So let's do it this way, he said seriously. I'll give you a month's salary in advance so that you can rent a room for the first time. Don't refuse. I need a responsible employee, and without a permanent home, you're unlikely to do a good job. Emily didn't know how to respond. It was rare that anyone cared about her. So now it was hard to hold back tears, so much so that she was touched by her future boss's behavior. Jason did give her the money, and she rented a room near the restaurant. After getting to know the staff, Emily began her duties. Despite the constant bustle in the kitchen, she enjoyed washing dishes. She seemed to be the most cheerful in this new company. The cooks and waitresses often complained about their paychecks and lack of days off. But it's not like they were wandering around town with one bag looking for some part-time work for fear of being left on the street. Emily shrugged, smiling. The only person who disliked the new girl was the receptionist, Paul. This short, chubby man with a round face, which almost always lit up with a friendly smile, for some reason began to pick on her from the first minute. Appearances rest less often and work more. He remarked as he passed by as she took a seat in a chair. At that moment, his smile seemed venomous and mocking to her. And what did I ever do to him? Emily sighed, pacing home. Her whole body felt immensely tired. The only way to eat a good dinner was at work. So all she wanted to do on the way home was fall on her bed and sleep until morning. Oops, someone behind her nudged her. Where are you from, baby? There was a small white puppy sitting at the entrance to the supermarket with red spots on his sides and a thin tail that dangled cheerfully from side to side. Emily stroked the puppy's head and went inside. When she left the store, she bought a bag of dog food just in case. Her worst fears were realized. The little boy was sitting on the sidewalk nearby, as if waiting for someone. The street was empty, and behind her back, the vendor closed the door from the inside, obviously preparing to clean up and go home. But what am I going to do with you, silly? Emily asked sadly. As the puppy greedily devoured the food, she followed him all the way home, soaking wet from the rain. Skinny, panicked just like her, unwanted and alone like herself. She walked into the entryway and called the elevator. At the 10th floor, it descended, not lingering anywhere, and she was irresistibly drawn back. Finally, she couldn't stand it, waved her hand, and stepped outside. The puppy crouched against the wall, trying to hide from the rain. At the sight of Emily, he stood up and his tail wiggled hesitantly. Okay, let's go, just be quiet. She took him under her arm after all and headed into the apartment. Luckily, the hallway was empty and no one was cooking in the kitchen. She walked to her room, opened the door, left her shopping, and carried the puppy into the bathroom to hastily wash and feed him. Then she went back to her room and closed up. Surprisingly, he didn't run, barked, ate yesterday's porridge mixed with food, and fell sound asleep on the mat by the bed. Then, able to think of what to do with him next, Emily washed her face and fell asleep. Over time, as the baby grew older and she accustomed him to taking morning and evening walks, Emily grew accustomed to her new life. More than once, she thought that the decision to have a dog in a communal apartment was the height of insanity. However, fate favored them. In the meantime, a noisy man who liked to scandalize moved out of the next room. So they were left with Emily, a quiet, inconspicuous student who came only to sleep, and an equally quiet woman whom they met occasionally in the kitchen or on the stairs. None of them had made any complaints about the puppy. So she settled in. What was really hard to do was to keep hiding the pregnancy from her coworkers. She didn't want to be pitied or ask unnecessary questions that she herself would have had trouble answering. but it was impossible to avoid the topic forever either. "Emily, confess, are you expecting a baby?" Dana, the blonde waitress, once asked, nodding toward her already rounded tummy. "Yes, I'm expecting," Emily replied simply. Wow. The girl's eyebrows crept upward in surprise. She looked at her coworker with big eyes, but then added with a smile, "I'm happy for you." That evening, when they had already left, Dana gathered everyone in the locker room and broke. Everyone, except the receptionist, treated the new girl well. So they didn't mind congratulating her, and in a couple of days, a folding crib was purchased in the closet, and in the refrigerator food for a feast was saved. There was nothing to do. "Congratulate her on being pregnant," Jason said arrogantly, in response to the offer to join the group. Without him, however, there were plenty of people willing to join. Everyone from the cooks and waiters to the janitor and the janitorial staff joined in the festivity. Emily was moved to tears. She had not expected such a warm attitude on the part of total strangers and new people. And their gift came just in time, especially since they delivered and assembled it themselves. Now in the corner of Emily's room stood a pretty wooden crib with a blue mattress and pillows, and above it rock stars made of soft felt. And after the feast, for the first time in years, she was able to speak out and put into words all her pain, fears, and hopes. "I'm sorry if I'm minding my own business," Dana began when they were left alone to clean up the table. It was immediately clear what she wanted to ask: who's the father of the baby? After a moment's silence, Emily decided to speak. Her colleague was not the kind of person who spread gossip and asked only for the sake of idle curiosity. But still, telling about her personal life was very hard. "You don't have to tell me if you want to," Dana remarked, sensing the awkward pause. "He came to visit us in the village, to our relatives, businesslike, so handsome in a car. We ran into him one day outside the store. We got to talking. He walked me almost home. 'Where in the middle of nowhere did you find such a beautiful girl?' I asked, and I blossomed. I thought I was in love. I thought I was, but I didn't. I wasn't actually in love. Only he wasn't what I thought he was. But that's something you don't realize right away." "So how did you end up here?" Dana asked. "He snuck me out and took me to the city," said Emily. "Really?" But seeing the horror in Dana's eyes, she smiled, like snatched me, sedated me with sleeping pills, and drove me away in a car. "No, I went on my own, and even happily at the time. I lived with my aunt. She worked on her relative's farm as a child. When her aunt found out that Emily had been sneaking out on dates, she pressed her, rebuked her, saying she was ungrateful and should pray to her for sheltering an orphan after her parents died. Dana blurted out in her heart. Emily cried but agreed with her. She was forced to work longer hours than usual, forced to spend her evenings in the vegetable garden, as if her hopes were dashed for something good. Cut off. He had to leave that day, and she shed so many tears that she could have watered all the beds with them. But he didn't leave without you. No, she didn't notice anything from her grief. And he stood behind the fence and called to her softly. "You want to hurry?" he said. She nodded. Her heart was pounding like crazy, as if ready to jump out of her chest. How had her aunt not noticed? She still wondered, but he helped her over the fence, and the car was parked nearby. That's how she found herself in a house dress and dirty slippers in the city. What happened next? Dana asked impatiently. He rented an apartment. I lived in it for a while. Bought me some clothes. And showed me around the city. It went on like that for a month and a half until I found out he was married. There was a lump in my throat, but I didn't want to cry. Apparently, the pain from those events gradually faded into the past. He said we either live like this or we split up. It turns out that it was just a hobby for him, a way to take a break from his wife and children. That's how I ended up on the street. I couldn't go back to my aunt. She'd eat me by train. I started to survive on temporary earnings, traveling around the cities in search of housing and food. And then I got pregnant like a snowball. At first, I didn't want to believe it, but no, my belly's growing. I haven't even been to the hospital once. "How?" exclaimed Dana. "Make sure you go. You have to get attached and get checked out. And histories, of course. You're good for coming to us." Luck. She smiled. Days went by. It turned out that even David's constant taunts and displeasure were something to get used to. It was getting harder and harder to do the dishes, get to and from work, and walk the baby. But even here, she tried not to complain and to look at everything with a positive attitude. One day, on her way home from her morning shift, Emily hesitated at the exit and sat down at a vacant table to tie her shoelaces. Her thoughts of how hard it would be to manage even simple tasks were suddenly interrupted. Behind her, at a neighboring table, sat a man and a woman. Apparently, they had come in for lunch and were animatedly discussing things at work. I went out into the hallway today, and he's standing in the window watching. Susan told me later that he stands like that every day. Waiting for his mom to come get him, came a pleasant female voice. Doesn't he have any relatives at all? The interlocutor asked. No one, as far as I know, refusing it. And there's nothing to treat him for. What don't they treat him? They help, of course, as much as they can, and the doctor comes every week from the children's polyclinic. But you understand there's always not enough money. She could not tear herself away from the chair. A conversation between two strangers and even overheard. But the story they were discussing touched her to the core. When the guests got up, she got up as well and headed after them. Just going for a walk. For interest's sake, she promised herself. The man and woman didn't notice the surveillance. They continued to discuss something until they reached a gray, unassuming building surrounded by a metal fence. A playground was visible away from the entrance. The windows on the second floor were decorated with paper flowers. What's the surprise? This was an orphanage. The small figure of a blonde-haired boy wearing a blue plaid shirt appeared in one of the windows. He looked around, as if searching for someone with his eyes. When he spotted Emily, he rose on his tiptoes and looked at her expectantly. A moment later, the curtain behind which he had been hiding moved, and a large woman in a brightly colored blouse and a carelessly curled lock of hair appeared behind him. She took him by the arm and with difficulty led him away. The boy tried to hold on and grab the windowsill. The child's strength was not enough to resist. His heart plummeted downward. The conversation of the visitors, the scene in the window, the shelter all came together in one picture. She rang the intercom, told the guard she was here to see the director, and, finding the right office, knocked. Did I understand you correctly? You want to pay for Peter's treatment? The headmistress asked with restrained surprise. Yes, Emily replied confidently, on the way from the gate to this office. She had calculated that she would give away some of her modest savings. Well, good. We'll be glad to have you, said the superintendent. Tell me, are you a relative of his? No, I heard about his story by chance, said Emily. Can I see the boy? Peter stood at the window again, looking among the passers-by for someone to come and get him. He was too thin and small for a 5-year-old, and Emily wanted to hug him. Peter, you have visitors, his teacher told him calmly. The child turned around, eyes as blue as his shirt, and hesitantly peered out from behind the curtain. They were sitting in some office in the presence of the very woman from the orphanage who had dined at the restaurant that day. The boy folded his hands in his lap and fiddled with a small toy. Emily scolded herself for not carrying some cute little trinket in her bag, like a keychain or a notebook. What can I get you next time I'm here? She asked goodbye. It was obvious that Peter was glad that she had decided to come again, but he didn't dare to ask for anything, and only modestly lowered his head. Will you say something in my ear? Emily asked, leaning over, and he nodded in agreement. Hey, pencils, the boy whispered. Good, she said, and hugged him gently. That evening, counting the dollars she had saved, she took a deep breath, realizing how precious every dollar would soon be to her. Still, she didn't regret her decision to help Peter. She couldn't get past his story, especially after seeing it with her own eyes. The next day, Emily, completely immersed in her thoughts, did everything on automatic. Returning to the kitchen from the locker room, where she'd gone to get a sweater, she ran into a tall man who reminded her very much of Jason. At first, she'd mistaken him for her boss. I'm sorry, she said guiltily, smiling. That's all right, the stranger answered her. Do you work here? Yes, in the kitchen. My name is Emily. Nice to meet you. I'm Kevin. Do you know where my brother Jason and your brother are? I think he went somewhere. You better ask the manager, Emily suggested. He's in the lounge talking to the bartender. Kevin smiled sweetly, keeping his eyes on Emily, and went to look for David. The girl smiled back embarrassedly and then hurried into the kitchen. In a matter of weeks, the orphanage and its residents had become Emily's own. On weekends, she came to Peter's house, bringing fruit, toys, paints, felt tip pens, coloring books, and coloring books. Of course, all of this had to be shared with the other children. But in the moments when the two of them sat together in the meeting room, Peter became the sole owner of a whole wealth. Since their first meeting, the boy had grown cheerful and strong, and as before, he ran to the window where he now looked out for Emily. "I drew you a picture," he said one day, and handed her a sheet of paper. It showed a woman with long hair walking among the trees and flowers, holding the hand of a little boy in a blue shirt. In the corner was the inscription, "Emily from Peter." "Now, that's beautiful. Did you write the letters yourself?" Emily asked. "Yes," the boy answered proudly, fiddling with the design kit while Emily brushed away a tear. She'd never asked where he'd come from in the orphanage, whether he remembered his family, who he'd been waiting for looking out the window, but she wanted to know it very much. The girl went to the headmistress. "Oh, Emily, sighed the woman. "It would be all right if he were from some bad family." "What's wrong with his family?" Emily asked. "I didn't tell you that," she whispered. "He's the grandson of a local businessman. There's a restaurant not far from here. Have you seen it?" Emily nodded. "Well, they have these restaurants all over the city," continued the manageress. "And the boy here to us said, how come?" Emily asked, dumbfounded. "I don't know," she said. "They say his eldest son and his wife divorced. She married a second time. Now he lives in luxury, and he forgot about the child. He sent gifts for a while, and then he disappeared. Peter remembers him. No, he was just a baby when he came to us, and if he's waiting for someone, we're all waiting." In the months she'd lived here, Emily had walked the entire neighborhood, so there was no doubt. There was only one restaurant in the neighborhood, and Peter was in her boss's family. The image of a wealthy, confident man of chic appearance, clearly in need of nothing, came to mind. How could he leave the child in the orphanage, forget about him, give him to the care of strangers? Her sense of injustice grew in her until it was impossible to contain it. "Dana, do you know where Timothy's father, our principal, is? Everyone talks about him with such respect," she asked as nonchalantly as possible, as if she were just curious. "I've only seen him once," Dana said. "A man like a man, short, gray-haired. He's kind of in charge of the main restaurant, and he's given his sons the branch." After finding the address of the place, Emily ran home after her shift to feed and take the baby outside. Then she drove downtown to meet Michael Alexander in person. He appeared to be a very personable and businesslike man, sitting in a leather chair behind a large, heavy desk. "What can I do for you?" he asked her courteously, looking at her carefully. "I don't know where to begin," Emily admitted and told him everything she knew, trying to be tactful and calm. Michael Alexander listened without interrupting. It was hard to tell from his face what he was thinking and how he felt about what he had heard. "So you're saying that I have a grandson?" Stretching his words after a pause, he said. "Yes," she answered confidently. "Well, good. Leave me your number. I want to know more about it. As soon as I know, I'll call you." And he called exactly 2 days later, saying that he did not know about his grandson, but now he wanted to participate in his fate. There was confusion and even sadness in his voice. "Did you really melt your grandfather's heart?" Jason asked, smiling, when Peter's story had become public. "I guess I did, didn't I?" Emily smiled back. "He wants to take him in, and he's asking me to babysit. I just don't know how I'm going to keep up with everything." "We'll leave you fewer shifts, and soon we'll send you on maternity leave," the boss said, and she thought he sounded tender in his voice and looked at her in a special way. "Emily, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Me?" Footsteps sounded behind her. It was Kyle. He was surprised to see Peter as his father had been. But contrary to his anxious expectations, he didn't get angry or pull away. On the contrary, he also decided to take part in the boy's upbringing. "Emily, you're a very kind and bright person," the man said when they were alone. "Do not think that I left my wife and son. I really didn't know about him, but it's not for me to judge," he shrugged. They were nearing the end of their 5th month of pregnancy, but they were still strong enough to go about their daily business. Peter finally waited for his happiness and looked out the window. He was taken to his grandfather's house, given a whole room, and bought a sea of toys. In the mornings, he was taken to daycare by Michael Alexander's driver, and in the afternoons, Emily came over to study and play with him. The wife of the owner was about 20 years younger than him and was more engaged in her own life. so that she was almost not visible. The baby, unexpectedly for the owners, became the favorite of the whole apartment. Neighbors, and even the dog, who at first cold to the newcomer dog, with time became sociable with him. Freedom walked along the corridor and even sometimes stayed at someone's house for the night. Emily was glad. When it was time to give birth, she would have someone to leave him with. One warm day in August, when nothing seemed to be going wrong and work at the restaurant was going on as usual, the man Kyle had been talking to Sandy with suddenly changed his face. "But come by the manager's office when you're free," he said sternly as he looked into the kitchen. Everyone who was around at that moment looked at them in surprise. "I thought he was in love with you." "Oh, don't make up nonsense," Emily retorted, pretending it was no big deal, though she wondered how she could have earned that attitude. How had he asked? She'd walked into Jason's office after work, who'd left that day, leaving his older brother in his place instead of David, his deputy. "Why are you prying into someone else's life without figuring things out?" Kyle began his interrogation abruptly. "Is something wrong?" "I don't understand. That's what I don't understand. Why meddle in another family's affairs? I have to justify myself to my father for the umpteenth time. And it's all because of you, because you stick your nose where it doesn't belong." He'd never allowed himself to talk to her like that before, and she cried with resentment, holding herself back. It turned out that Kyle had called his ex-wife Sandy last night to remind her of her son. She had reacted coldly, not wanting to hear about her past life. The woman was quite happy with the way her fate had settled after the divorce. "You say you don't want a son?" Kyle asked her, starting to boil over. "And you're up for being a good father. I'll give you a look at you, Sandy. You're a fool, maybe you are. At least I'm not abandoning my child," I'm sure she was almost laughing. "What do you mean? Have you forgotten that we've been living like strangers lately? Have you lost your memory? It is not your child, not yours, as it is not mine." "Whose is it then? It doesn't matter. And anyway, I'm sick of you. Leave me alone. Why didn't I just block your number?" Sandy was indignant, while Kyle's unpleasant realization dawned on her. David. Yes, silence followed those words, and everything suddenly made sense. Silence. Nothing to say. So live with that for the rest of your life, knowing that your sick child is in an orphanage and your lover works under your ex-husband's boss. "Kyle, don't shame me. He promised to divorce his wife and take care of me and the boy." Sandy's voice shook, but he didn't wait for her remorse and disconnected. David, the restaurant administrator, was scandalously fired. He didn't want to lose his position over some personal relationship. "Get out," Kyle pointed at the door, and the usually cheerful face of the administrator twisted with anger. "Aren't you the boss here?" he said sharply and looked at Jason with hope in his eyes. "I stand in solidarity with my brother," the principal replied tiredly. "If you have thoughts of going to your father, you can waste no time. Will you?" I'm sure he's furious that he had to recognize a complete stranger's child as his grandson. After all of this wrangling, Jason went home to not see his brother or anyone at all for a while. When he heard what had happened, he couldn't believe it. Even in the morning, it had seemed like things couldn't have turned out better. She had a place to live, a job, and a very attractive and wealthy man who was paying attention to her. Peter had finally found a family, and the only thing she had to think about was how to get healthy and have a son. "Should I leave now?" she asked without raising her eyes to Kyle. Yes, still in accounting, he cut him off stiffly. After getting the money, she headed over to Peter's house to play with him and take her mind off her heavy thoughts at the same time. Karina, Kyle, and Jason's stepmother opened the door. Seemed more like their sister. "What do you want?" she asked, looking Emily over from head to toe. "I came to study with Peter. Don't come here again." Michael Alexander said not to let you in. She slammed the door right in her guest's face. For a couple minutes, Emily stood like that, looking through the brown metal doors with gold embellishments in the shape of battered plants. This was it. Life was falling apart again. After the happy months with their plans and dreams, there was once again a bleak emptiness, uncertainty, and loneliness to look for a job again, but that would hardly be easy with a belly like this. And what about Peter? What would they say to him? How will they treat him now? All week, on her way to the store to look for a part-time job, Emily would purposely pass by the orphanage. Maybe she'd see Peter in the window, but there were other little faces peering out from behind the curtains, probably waiting for someone to come for them. There wasn't, but that didn't mean he was all right. She took a walk with the baby over the weekend and had a hurried snack. Emily lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling for a long time, wondering what to do next. The baby was moving slightly inside, and it immediately gave her strength and desire to live, because she was carrying a whole person and could not give up like that. In the corner of the room was a crib, which was gradually filled with tiny things. Instead of a stroller, she bought a sling to carry the baby to the hospital or the store. Not always convenient, but there wasn't enough money for a stroller anyway. There was a knock on the door. She shuddered in surprise, clumsily got up and opened it. "There's a man here to see you," the neighbor said, and went straight to his room. Who could it be? Wasn't David out to avenge his dismissal? Who knows? Emily walked cautiously to the door and looked through the peephole. Jason was standing there. "Hi," he said guiltily when he saw his former subordinate. "Hi." Emily looked at him questioningly, trying to figure out why he was here and if it had anything to do with Peter. "I'm sorry you had to get hurt because of our family squabbles. It's nothing really," he said. Taking the baby with them, they walked outside, leaving the gray yards and heading for the park. Jason took the leash, bought them each a large ice cream cone, and generally acted very attentive and caring. Emily was relieved. It felt so peaceful and good inside all of a sudden. "Do you know how Peter is?" she asked anxiously. "I don't know. I haven't been there in a long time, but I know he's staying at his father's house." While they were walking, Peter was running around the house, fleeing from his foster grandmother. He accidentally broke her favorite vase, and the woman was beyond angry. That's not to say she was really upset about the broken dishes. Rather, she was looking for an excuse to scare him, as she hated her grandson for taking attention away from her. Her husband had become too attached to the boy. The nursery was piled to the ceiling with toys. There were at least 3 scooters and a bicycle in the hallway. On weekends in the house appeared animators in costumes of cartoon characters. And in the evenings, the grandfather liked to sit with his grandson and chat about adventures, read him fairy tales. Such a distraction from her specialty could not help but anger that was not why she had married and pretended to be a model wife, to share the pedestal of the heiress with some child. True, the news that Peter became a bully cooled the ardor of Michael Alexander, and he began to come into the nursery less and less often. But that wasn't enough for Karina. She wanted the boy to go back to the orphanage and not spoil her plans. "Are you sad about work?" Jason asked, stroking the boy's head. "No, I'm not." They sat down on the bench. "Don't worry about it, and don't think about money at all." At one point, she would have been over the moon to hear such words. But too many things were weighing on her, so it was impossible to imagine how to get out of it. "Even if you help, I'm worried about Peter. I've gone to their place several times, but they either didn't open the door for me or Karina put me out with curses and promises to call the police on us. And Peter probably thinks I betrayed him," Emily said with a sigh. "Come on, she's not that scary," Jason smiled. "If you want, I can go over there one of these days, see how things are going, and give Peter something from you." "Oh, that would be great. Go, please," Emily asked, and he nodded in agreement. "But that's not all I'm worried about," she continued. "What else?" Jason asked anxiously, looking at Emily. It suddenly dawned on her that he wasn't just here out of politeness or guilt about being fired. "I have health problems. I haven't had a checkup in a long time. I had to survive, find a job, stay in hotels. I didn't have time for that. And recently they said that I need urgent treatment so that the baby will not be harmed, and I will be able to give birth safely. And what do you need for that?" "It's just a question of money." Jason was frightened. Emily sighed. She wanted to tell him that she had only enough money to pay for 2 months' rent and groceries, not to mention medicine and vitamins. But she couldn't. "Don't ask for anything. You'll manage somehow," she said to herself, and added aloud that she was the one complaining. "Don't listen to her. Everything will be all right." Jason hugged her. Nothing in return for the endless fear and helplessness came a sense of calm and even a sense of happiness. He arrived at the communal apartment again that evening, this time with 2 bags of groceries. Jason looked pleased, as if he'd accomplished something very good, or he'd had a brilliant idea that he couldn't share yet. "This is for you," he said cheerfully. "Thank you so much," Emily brightened. "Did something happen?" "I won't tell you before I tell you, but I promise you'll like it." With that, he left, and Emily greedily went through the goodies he'd brought her. She'd been saving money lately, buying only what she needed. And here were a variety of fruits, nuts, sweets, and yogurt. And among the variety of goodies, she found an envelope with the inscription, No refusals are accepted for medicines. We need you healthy. Emily pressed the envelope to her chest, stroking her belly. Her baby was safe. Emily would be treated, and all should be well. It seemed to be the happiest moment she'd had in a while. Jason hadn't told her his plan until the last minute, apparently afraid she'd say no. So she didn't know where he was taking her until they pulled up to Michael Alexander's house. "We're going to Peter's," she asked cautiously. "Yes, but first to my father's." "Say, would you like to take Peter in with you if you have a place to live?" "I'm not arguing, just say yes or no." "Of course I would," Emily said. She wanted to adopt Peter, but she didn't want to live off Jason. And that was exactly what he was thinking, judging by his questions. There was no way out. Overcome with self-doubt, she followed him straight to Michael Alexander's office. They came to the end of the chicly laid-back hallway, the door ajar, and a blonde head peeked out. Emily waved at Peter, and he smiled back. "We'll be in to see you soon," she said. The restaurateur was half reclining in a large armchair with a book in his hands, clearly surprised to see the uninvited guests. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" he asked in his usual polite manner. "Hi, Daddy. We need to talk," Jason said simply. "All right, I'm listening." Michael Alexander sounded displeased. He certainly didn't want to have any conversation. "We want to raise Peter on our own. You don't want him, do you?" The man grinned, lifted himself up, and threw his finger to the side. "Oh, how? Do you want—" "Yes, we sure do," Jason answered, looking into his father's eyes. Emily's heart warmed at those words. So her youngest son had grown up. "All right then, you can raise him if you want to live. Where will you be?" Michael Alexander thought, returning to his semi-reclined position and folding his hands on his stomach. "Not here, I hope," Jason said. "I'm getting ready to leave." "Then we're taking him." Peter stood tall and stepped out from behind the door, afraid he'd miss the moment when the guests left. He had decided for himself that he would check out, grab onto Emily, and never let go, because he couldn't sit alone and put up with Karen's nagging anymore, and his grandfather had almost stopped paying attention to him. "Emily, I've missed you so much," he said, hugging her as hard as he could, and then he hurried on. "Please don't leave me here. Please, please don't. I don't want to stay here anymore." "Of course I won't, Peter. Come on, pack your things and let's go. And there's a surprise waiting for you at home." The boy's eyes lit up at those words. He ran into his room and began clumsily putting his clothes into his backpack. He and Jason helped him gather the essentials and find his favorite toys. As they left the house, the company spotted Karen by her bright red, shiny car in the yard. She looked at them with disdain and smiled contentedly, realizing that the baby was no longer in her house. Peter hid behind Emily's back. As they walked past, no one noticed that Michael Alexander was watching them at that moment from the office window. He sighed and watched the car drive away until it disappeared around the corner. That evening, the surprise was not only for the boy who had long dreamed of a dog. Emily stood for a long time in the hallway of the apartment Jason had brought them to. That was the position he'd caught her in when he lifted her things out of the trunk. "What are you doing? Come on in," he said, smiling, and set the bags on the floor. From the living room came a cheerful murmur. Peter and the baby were already settling into their new accommodations and rolling around on the floor in their arms, one snickering, the other wincing. "I don't believe it," Emily muttered quietly. "Don't believe me." "Why not?" Jason got upset. "I don't," she smiled back. "I don't believe it happens like this, and that we're going to live in an apartment like this." Scared you. It's a fun apartment, like an apartment. It'll do for the first time. But for the future, of course, we need a larger one. He helped them clean up and put things away, and then he left, leaving them to settle in. In a day of joyful upheaval, Peter fell asleep immediately, and with him the baby, poking his wet red nose into the blanket. He was sleeping peacefully, not the other way around. For a long time she couldn't settle down to lie down. The days she had spent in her room with fear, contemplating the future, were imprinted in her with perpetual worry and dread. Thus, the birth of their son seemed to be an unpredictable and terrifying event, and their further existence in a small apartment with a shared bathroom and kitchen, a constant domestic discomfort. Now she wandered quietly through the stylishly furnished living room, looked into the kitchen, admired the snow-white bathroom with a large mirror and a warm floor. She looked out the window at the lights of the city at night. It was more like a dream than reality. For the first time, it seemed, in her entire life, she felt completely safe. Sleep caught up with her toward morning. Jason had paid for 3 months' rent at once. He'd helped set up the crib, brought gifts, and just visited often. At first, Emily had been haunted by the feeling that there was some intent or deception behind it all. Then came a sense of obligation to Jason. But thanks to his sincerity and kindness toward them, all of that soon passed and she was just glad for the idle. What do the doctors say? He inquired on one of his visits. All is well, they say. In November I will give birth. Son is healthy, developing perfectly, and weight is normal, said Emily. And she thought involuntarily what a good dad Jason would be. Somewhere in the back of her mind was the hope that he would love her baby and Peter as if they were his own. Oh, and guess what? While I was driving to the women's health clinic, I met Peter and his babysitter from the orphanage. What does she say? He asked politely. I didn't think it was a good idea to tell him about it after all. Oh, nothing. Glad Peter's living well now. Not that everyone there remembers him, because no one but him spent so much time at the window waiting. At that moment, a toddler in star-spangled pajamas and a scarf around his neck came running into the kitchen. And Peter, with an equally cheerful hairdo and a smeared face, ran in following. Mom, you know how he runs fast like an athlete, the boy said, panting. And, apparently coming to his senses, looked with big eyes at Emily, and then at Jason, said, what exactly? Great. Maybe we'll put him in the runner sports section. Emily smiled. She reached over, hugged him, and whispered in his ear, I love you, son. Peter brightened, took the candy from the table, and ran back into the living room, but immediately returned and cheerfully declared, I always knew it. In the light of events, the babysitter story was forgotten and no longer remembered as completely insignificant. Jason and Emily spent the rest of the evening quietly discussing the changes that had taken place in Peter's life over the past month. How he'd grown, how he'd stopped startling at night, how he'd taken responsibility for walking his favorite dog, and now these new, unfamiliar feelings, warm, joyful, overwhelming. But as soon as Jason left and all the chores were done, the thoughts returned. The babysitter they'd accidentally bumped into when they decided to walk from the hospital to the house. It had been creepy. She was such a chatterbox and would talk nonstop about everything that was going on in and out of the orphanage. We love Peter dearly, of course. It's so good that you took him in and that everything worked out for him. He is a wonderful boy, kind, responsive, whatever you ask always does. He just stands by the window. I feel sorry for him. I know he's waiting for his mom and dad, but I can't help him. The woman approached the territory, waving her grocery bags amusingly. Thank you for loving the children so much. Emily smiled. Who's your second child? A boy or a girl? Not jealous? No, I think we have enough love and attention for all of them, answered the nanny. That's good. And then there are all sorts of people. First they leave and then they come back, and the child has waited so long for her. Have you heard something? That someone had come to Peter's house before? Emily was surprised, but she thought she'd misunderstood. No, the woman mumbled. But I'm not going to keep quiet, so I'll just say it as it is. A woman came here, asking about him again. At first, she said she was a distant relative. She came to see him. She was interested in who took the child, were they to a family or just transferred to another institution. Then we got to talking. I even had time to cry. What did she say? Why did she decide to find out about her son after all these years? The unexpected news knocked Emily off her feet. Was this woman really going to take the baby away? Why would she want him? Because, like Kyle said, she lived in luxury and didn't need any children. Well, who knows her, the nanny said. The man, I understand, let her down. A new wife, mother-in-law, did some nasty things. But don't worry, I didn't tell her anything. It's strictly forbidden. Well, thank you for telling me about the wife. I don't remember the details. Like she was the one who convinced her to keep the baby in the hospital, and then she fought with my father's brother all the time, tried to break him up. In general, some unpleasant woman in their family. Sighed the nanny. Oh, thank you very much again, Emily said quickly, deciding to go the other way. She needed to be alone with her thoughts. You take good care of Peter, and come visit sometime. You're always welcome, Nanny said good-naturedly. Of course we will, Emily promised as they walked through the yards, past houses, playgrounds, and parking lots. Emily was determined that she would call Michael Alexander and tell him what she had learned. It felt like something unkind was lurking in his young wife. At that moment, she had no idea how fatal her call would be, upsetting him and his sons, and leaving Peter, to whom he was attached as a grandson. The elderly businessman would be all alone. Of course, he had a staff of assistants, a driver, a gardener, a cook, a maid. And Michael Alexander had a wife young, beautiful, slender, and spectacular. But none of these people really needed him. Everyone was only after his monetary interest. He handed over all the business affairs to Karina, and himself spent most of his time at home, sitting in his incredible size chair, drinking his favorite coffee and reading books. These cases brought him pleasure, but could not replace the simple live communication. With trembling hands, she dialed the number she had secretly written down from David's notebook long ago. "Hello," came the harsh male voice. "Michael Alexander, hello, it's Emily. You probably don't even want to hear from me, but there's something I really need to tell you." "It's important," she said quickly, in one breath so as not to slip up. She was surprised when, instead of hanging up or saying mean things, the man seemed pleased. "Hi, Emily, go ahead," he said in a measured tone. "One man was very persuasive about leaving the baby in the hospital, and he also tried to quarrel you and your sons and them among themselves. This person is your wife, Karina. I don't know how to explain it to you, but I think she's dangerous to you. Please be careful. Take care of yourself." "Understood," Michael Alexander said after almost a minute's silence. "Thank you. Tell Jason and Peter not to take offense at me." "Okay, I will." What happened next? She didn't know. Whether he listened to what she said, or whether he took it as silly fiction, or whether he told Karina about it. And they laughed together. Whatever it was, she did what she had to do. Let them deal with it themselves. She didn't dare say anything more. Emily was afraid of Jason's reaction. He hadn't liked to talk about his family since he'd been fired, and he didn't want to talk to his relatives. The news came on a most unexpected day. Since morning, she did not pull up her stomach, lying in the bathtub, but the contractions did not let go. On the contrary, little by little they intensified, although so far they were absolutely tolerable. Deciding to herself that there was enough money for the trip, she did not call the doctor and began to pack a bag to the maternity hospital. At that very moment, Jason knocked on the door, excited and pleased. "You're not going to believe this," he announced loudly, taking off his jacket. "My dad just called me. He was surprised. Yeah, he invited us over for a peace offering." "What about his Karina? She doesn't like guests." "But there is no Karina anymore," he added with a laugh. "Where did she go?" Emily, too, was amused by how funny Jason could be. But then a grimace of pain crossed her face, and the smile on his face changed to one of alarm. "What's wrong? Does it hurt?" He was frightened. "I'm going to the hospital." "It's time," Emily said in a snap and pointed to the clear bag on the bed. "So what's up with Karina, huh?" "Well, screw Karina. How are you going to do it? Right now? What am I supposed to do?" "Don't worry," she smiled. "I'll pack now and we'll go quietly. Just pick Peter up from daycare tonight, please, and tell him we'll be back soon with his brother." Jason was a little calmer now, but he still looked at her anxiously. And there was no doubt about Peter. He was in good hands for distractions on the road. Emily did ask to tell the interesting story of Karina's disappearance, though. It turned out that after that call, Michael Alexander really became suspicious, hired a private investigator, installed hidden cameras in the house, which he viewed in real time. That kind of vigilance proved to be very useful. His wife was going to poison her elderly husband and present everything as an accident. Mixed up, they say, the medicine drank what was needed. His heart couldn't take it. Dobre, Karen waved away, when her husband showed her a video where she slips a pill into the coffee. "What's crazy?" Michael Alexander laughed, surprised at her insolence. "It's your medicine. The doctor prescribed it." "I forgot. He already prescribed drops, not pills," he continued, forcing her to justify herself. "They weren't on the prescription. I bought the pills. If you don't want them, don't take them. I care about you, and you're suspicious. Show me the pills. Leave me alone. You senile old man." She screamed hysterically and ran to the kitchen to hide the medicine, but her husband beat her to it. "How can you be so cruel?" Emily shook her head indignantly. What did her father do? He kicked her out as usual and threatened to go to the police if she tried to hurt him or us again. although I think we should have filed a report. I mean, this is a real assassination attempt. Emily was met in the waiting room and asked to go to the ward. As they parted, they hugged, and Jason whispered in her ear, "It's going to be okay. I love you." It was amazing how much those words affected her. It felt so warm and safe at once. The boy was born late that night, and Jason and Peter were with them in the morning. They were admiring the red face and the white bonnet. The baby opened one eye and looked at him seriously and smacked his lips softly. "Will he always be so small?" Peter asked in a whisper. "No, he will grow up quickly, learn to run, and you will play together in the cars." "You," said his mother. "I don't know what to do with such a little one," the boy exhaled. "Really?" Jason and Emily exchanged understanding looks. After they were discharged, Mikey's grandfather and uncle wanted to meet the newborn. Emily only smiled as she watched a broad-shouldered and sad Michael Alexander gently rock the baby while Kyle gave him advice on what lullaby to sing to help the baby sleep better. The family is finally reunited. A year and a half after these events, Emily began to leave her youngest son with a nanny and herself returned to the restaurant where she was now in charge of things in the kitchen. The guests loved the menu, which was updated with her participation, so there was plenty of work to do. One thing had been troubling her heart all this time, but Jason was so preoccupied with work and the children that he kept putting off a decision that was important to both of them. Finally, one day, arriving at the restaurant, as usual by 9, Emily discovered a sign at the entrance that read "Special Service." "What is that?" She wondered and walked inside to the lounge exit. A path of pink petals. Trying not to step on them, Emily stepped forward, planning to reprimand the new receptionist for not telling her in advance about the festivities, what the menu would be, how many people would be there, and what time they would be arriving. Were the thoughts in her head getting confused? Maybe that was why she didn't immediately realize what was going on. The hall was decorated with fresh flowers and ribbons, and in the center stood a large cake with champagne and glasses. All the restaurant staff were crowded around it, and Michael Alexander was here, and behind them was someone else. Jason, Emily said more out of surprise than any desire to address her lover. He came out to her satisfied, happy in a suit, and with a bouquet in his hands. Only now did she remember yesterday's hints, dressing up and the suspicious need to leave early this morning. "Oh, good thing I wore a dress," Emily thought, feeling her legs and arms begin to tremble with excitement. "My sweet Emily." Jason began very formally. "We've been together for so long, but I kept putting this event off. The household, the moves, the kids. Everything seemed like the wrong time, but now I'm ready." He pulled a box out of his pocket and opened it. Inside glittered a gold ring set with many small shining diamonds. "Marry me," he smiled, and Emily glowed back, nodding, "Of course," and all the guests applauded. The next event swirled before her like a kaleidoscope. The flowers, the white dress, Peter in his first business suit, Jason's delighted face when she walked out to him, and they got into a white car decorated with gold rings. Live music, clinking glasses, the glitter of flares. Guests twirled in a dance, winking, smiling at the newlyweds, who also kept up and set the tone for the entire evening. In the midst of all this splendor, she was transported back for a moment, and a long fenced-in area, a rosary in Zoe's face. Her past appeared before her. At that moment, the closest thing to it. The first date, the elopement, the trains, the markets. Surprisingly, she'd almost forgotten that time, even though it had seemed like it was with her forever at the time. What would have happened if she hadn't decided to climb over the fence, get into the car, and drive off into the unknown with her hands dirty after work, without belongings and without money? It's scary to imagine. And how great everything turned out in the end after so many years of hardships, trials, and worries. Suddenly, the frightening images of childhood and youth blurred. Music, voices, and joyful laughter around her came back again. The smiling faces of her friends spun around. Yes, now she is where she feels good. The people she loves the most, Emily, her mom and her wife, are around. And there are still a lot of pleasant troubles ahead. Family joys, children's laughter, small gifts for holidays, joint trips to the movies, and much more. Now everything will definitely be very good. Amanda was experiencing the very real state of dread of a clean slate, even though she was neither a writer nor a journalist. Tomorrow, she was starting a new life and a new job with accommodation. The employer is a wealthy, powerful businessman who clearly doesn't know his capital account. Without further ado, he made his conditions to her over the phone. I need a carer with a degree in psychotherapy to be near my daughter 24 hours a day. I have a comfortable country house with excellent living conditions. You will be completely comfortable, but for the 3 months of your probationary period, you will not get a single day off. A generous salary will compensate you for this temporary inconvenience. And the man, who called himself Carl, quoted her fee so much that Amanda's legs gave out. Her monthly income would be the equivalent of her hospital salary for the year with all bonuses and fringe benefits. They agreed that she would start her duties in 3 days. During this time, she would gather all the personal belongings she needed and select the necessary medical devices for the patient's sessions. She will then be authorized to make a list of anything else she may need in her work. The car will pick you up at your front door at 800 hours sharp. The driver's name is Andrew. Send me your home address to this number. Carl pronounced the words sharply and clearly as if he were minting coins. Amanda even thought that every minute of this man, apparently, is worth both silver and gold. Too businesslike. But it even appealed to her. She didn't respect the soreness and gruel in his speeches. She judged people by their actions, not by their sweet voice. She knew in her 26 years that time puts everything in its place and stigmatizes characters. Who's worth what? Here she is, Amanda herself, a psychotherapist with a red diploma, the beauty and pride of the faculty, the hope of the department. At school, all lightweight and character girlfriends on discos and bars in high school fluttered. She crammed a place in the medical university on the budget, partially guaranteed only a gold medal. The support should have been passed on excellent final exams. There was no money for a serious education in the family of Max, a plumber, and his wife, Idaka, who worked in a bakery as a saleswoman. No, her parents were not some marginalized individuals. Father even drank. Only on holidays, did not complain of this bad habit, and with men colleagues, every paycheck did not cheat. He came from a remote, abandoned village and ended up in the city when clever businessmen bought out all the agriculture in his small homeland for the farming kingdom. A kind of holding there now appeared with dairy and meat processing plant of a new format with technological lines of the most innovative kind. Max was called to work there, but he held a grudge against the new owners, that they almost uprooted the pogost on the outskirts, where his and his wife Ida's parents were buried, that the village was torn down to nothing, turned into ashes, ruins, an archaeological monument of their former life inwardly. He knew it was just as well. The population in their village was finally getting drunk. There was no work. Everyone was leaving for the city in droves. Only he and Ida held on to their hut and 10 acres of land, but then they gave up too. Amandochka was 14 years old at that time. That's how she became a city girl. With the proceeds from the sale of land and house, they bought a 2-room flat in the city. The 5-story red brick building was strong. It would stand for a long time. Max was taken to the factory with open arms. The salary was small, but their family made ends meet. Ida quickly made friends with the women neighbors. They told her there was room in the bakery. The old saleswoman had just taken a well-deserved holiday. Working, Ida was well received, not offended. Happiness ended overnight. Max came to pick up his wife from the bakery in an old car. Clumsy bread van in the courtyard, clumsily turned around, crushed under himself a kopeck, not even immediately noticing what happened. Versions of the driver and passenger died on the spot. Amanda's urban life began with orphanhood. Amanda used to rush to school like a prodigy, always loved to learn, books about relationships between people so in general swallowed overnight. So she was interested in who and how of the heroes will act when he tail-nailed, in a stalemate plunged into a stalemate, with all the guts in front of the choice put in the orphanage, where she got after the tragedy, at first snickered, but then sublimated on the study, not to think, not to remember, untimely departed loved ones. 6 months later, her foster parents took her under guardianship, but warm, cordial relations with them were not born. She moved to them in 2 rooms and a communal room, still not an orphanage, where everyone dreamed of a family and parents even at a young age, but she dreamed of growing up and living alone. Naive, touching young lady Amanda tried to assess the behavior of people, to guess who and how they would show themselves, taking into account their temperament and character, a kind of homegrown psychologist. And even more, she liked to think about the fact that a person can be broken to change the line of his behavior, to convey. In the 10th grade, Amanda disappeared in the scientific library, where she read Freud, Jung, Bandura, Halperin, Beck, Bekarev. Her classmates did not know the names of such names, and she melted and molted from her new discoveries. Her gold medal at school suffered, sitting days and nights on her heels over textbooks. Her merits did not include gifts, offerings to teachers. There was no one to pay. Talented student high marks were given sincerely and generously. Her peers did not persecute the crazy girl. They had long since given up on her eccentricities, although there were good reasons to pay more attention to her. Amanda was ravishingly beautiful, possessing that very feminine magic when men turn into slaves, admirers, barely having seen such a rare specimen of external perfection. Her hair, the color of ripe wheat, fell in waves down her smooth back. Green eyes with dark pupils beckoned to drown in their depths. Lush forms gave birth to a halo of sensuality. Graceful wrists and ankles hinted at blue blood, charm, aristocratism. Refined nature had not rested on her appearance. Only Amanda herself did not seem to notice any of this, persistently gnawed the granite of science, and ignored the languid glances of representatives of the stronger sex of all ages. After receiving a certificate of secondary education orphan, and even a medalist in the medical university took pity. Dramatic life at the girl, you can make an exception on the budget place to look for a place. She passed the entrance exam on excellent without tutors and material investments. She returned to her flat, left after the death of her parents. Private property, nothing can be done or taken away. She dressed unfashionably, modestly. Not as a garden scarecrow, of course, adhered to strict classics, a little leveling her natural charm. She didn't notice men around her from the word at all. She was so keen on Mrs. Psychology, but one day she fell for a seasoned catcher. Mason was also good-looking, ironic, daring, and unpredictable. With this Amanda managed to she fell head over heels in love. She responded enthusiastically to the offer to drop by for a glass of wine, knowing perfectly well what would follow, except the guy had a nasty little soul. Amanda laid in bed on a bet with a guy from the majors who was courting the girl, but got a turnaround. Told a fellow student, "Son, don't sit on the crate. I'll take this girl down without a hitch." He grinned, and then you'll follow the beaten track. Got it. Rip. Don't teach a scientist. The golden child of an important daddy. If you get her to be easy for me, I'll slip you 100 grand. So Mason worked his arse off. Amanda figured out the catch the next time they met after their wild night. Her hot bayo looked like an ice cube. She didn't faint. She wrote off her fascination with the smarmy Mason as hormones. Only the fee to the self-confident, handsome man did not get. Amanda made far-reaching conclusions for herself, and now she wouldn't let male representatives within a kilometer of her. Coffee with cakes in the nearest cafe between couples was always welcome. Going to the cinema for the premiere as a group, why not? The rest of the attempts in her address, reminiscent of courtship, suppressed at the root. Around the crowd of those wishing only hoped in vain, all waited a complete refusal. Trouble for the young doctor after completing the theoretical course of classes did not end there. Place and residency received deservedly in a prestigious psychotherapeutic hospital. They greedily caught every word of her new idol, the head of the Department of Rehabilitation after serious cognitive disorders. He taught the resident a lot, eagerly listening to his recommendations. He handled difficult patients, then helped her with a referral to another prestigious place. And there the persecution from the male community continued. The first swallow, or rather a persistent eagle guest, was one of the doctors with professional weight in the clinic. He did not go round and round. He called the young specialist to his office. "We need to have dinner with you today to discuss the prospects of your work in our institution. Warn me at home that you won't come for the night." He told her directly, without any offense, straight to the forehead, that her career was only through his bed. He abruptly and without regret refused the invitation, for which she soon paid the price. It turned out that before her appearance in this institution with sedatives under strict control, everything was clear. Then she showed up, and expensive pills started going missing in packs. Her involvement or non-involvement in the thefts was not investigated. They quickly pointed at the door, threatening proceedings with a subsequent wolf ticket and blacklisting in the profession. The next incident occurred at the specialized ambulance station where she got a job. The brigades had a narrow focus. to take them out of a hangover, to deal with aggressive behavior that led to a fight, injury to loved ones in a state of temporary effect. Their patients were people on the brink, balancing between the diagnosis of incompetent and incapacitated, living between bouts of mental illness and remission. Why weren't they isolated from society? There were plenty of reasons. Somewhere relatives ransomed the blood babies, and somewhere the border guards themselves were able to prey with the help of money and connections from suspicions of abnormality. Amanda had never realized there were such medical services in their city. She'd been brought here by the same call from a faculty member who'd patronized her during her residency. Trips to the inadequates, as her team called them, were over in a month. That time she was on the same team as the head of their office. He also sometimes took part in psychological raids, saying that he hadn't been to the circus for a long time and wanted to have fun. Amanda was disgusted by his cynicism, but had no choice. After a fairly quiet shift, the supervisor volunteered to give her a lift home. The institution was located outside the city. The first bus was still an hour away. Everyone was tired after a sleepless night. On her own head, the young woman agreed. But the chief didn't go to the city, but drove her to the nearest woods. Folly, I don't like ceremonies. He breathed in her face with his breath. He wasn't afraid of anything. When already in the car, he drank half of a flat glass flask of cognac. Amanda immediately wanted to leave the car, but he only laughed. I have half of the city receive certificates of sanity in the right cases. I'm not afraid of neither the authorities nor the traffic police. She herself could not explain later where the strength came from to slap him hard. The man's head jerked. He looked at his colleague in surprise. Not cooperative, you say? Well, go fish out of here. The field to the city, 11 kilometers. While you walk, you will air your brains in the cold. There's no place in my team for a naughty girl. Ask any of our female employees. Now get out. Amanda didn't ask anyone. The next shift, she wrote a letter of resignation, and that was that. Out of practice again, out of work again. She stayed home for a month and a half. None of the clinics did not want to take her even to the place of a nurse. Glimmers of her unreliability filled the medical world, and it was up to everyone to interpret them. Amanda's psychotherapist, advanced in matters of different types of aggression, was well aware of such a Western phenomenon as harassment. But the woman had never imagined that she herself would become its victim. She did not yet know how the owner of a bright female beauty to put up barriers against vile molestations, rudely violating her personal space. This was something she would have to think hard about in the future. A late call from Carl the day before had interrupted a long string of bad luck. She wouldn't just go for the job, she'd crawl into it if she had to. Why was she so scared and excited at the same time? She couldn't explain it herself. What will the coming day bring me? She hummed for some reason, in a bass voice, and then asked further, will I fall pierced by an arrow? Then she would laugh loudly to drive the nasty fear further inwards. The job was ambiguous. A carer for a girl with a fatal blood disorder and Asperger's. The notorious syndrome was unfamiliar to ordinary people far removed from medical terms. In a nutshell, its effect on patients could be characterized as inability, impossibility, or inclination to communicate with the outside world. Existence in their own narrow world into which strangers were rarely allowed. In society, such people are called autistic. The anamnesis of Amanda's future ward was aggravated by a serious blood disease, autoimmune in nature. Inside the unfortunate victim, some cells kept proving to others that they were the main ones, destroying the body tissues caught on the warpath. The patient's condition was now rated medium severity. Protracted remission gave her father a chance to be near his favorite girl longer. But how long the insidious disease will behave decently, knew, in all probability, only the Almighty in heaven. The doctors only parted their hands. May he and see, Carl, we are doing everything we can, but only a miracle can help the girl. You and I live in the real world, with its cruel laws of Mother Nature ruling over all living beings on the planet. I've heard it all 1,000 times, replied the inconsolable father. What's your advice? How can I brighten her life? If she does not react to any, unconcerned, inactive, quieted, and silent. I've never seen if she can smile. For 16 years of constant uncertainty, it can drive you crazy. Mostly renowned autism spectrum disorder specialist sitting in the chair across from Carl thought for a few seconds. Then, I have one doctor with a not-so-successful professional path. Doesn't get along for long in any treatment facility. and I can't get from her the reasons for these constant fiascos. She was one of the most intelligent students on my course, gave great hopes, burning desire to benefit disadvantaged people, followed all the methods and innovations in our field, and in clinics deflated like a balloon. Unfortunately, I cannot patronize every brilliant student of mine. Made a couple of patronages for her, but it didn't work out. She and I recently met by chance at a cake shop where I was buying a cake for my wife's birthday, exchanged contacts in case I had information again about vacancies somewhere in our sponsored hospitals. I invite this girl. She did her residency at my hospital, and I can vouch for her almost as much as I can. Carl weighed the pros and cons and decided that he had nothing to lose. The old carers couldn't cope with Elizabeth. So maybe this young girl could do something. There were quite a few residents in his large house. His favorite cook, Vanessa, who had been with him for 30 years, her son Ashley, the gardener, and Vanessa's au pair, a maid with the exotic name of Gabriella. There's room for the unknown Amanda, with 4 guest rooms empty. Gabby, as he called the maid to himself. I'll have to give her the order to do it. The ice of the experiment that would turn their lives around had broken. Amanda decided to start the radical changes in her life with her appearance. She needed to create a new working image that would hide her natural beauty as much as possible. She didn't want this heavenly gift, which she thought was unnecessary and undeserved, to interfere with her work again. The young woman's not-so-extensive wardrobe consisted of loose trousers, baggy skirts in dark colors, oversized jumpers, blouses, low-cut shoes, and boots. A couple of funny pajamas with Cheburashka and Gina and bunnies on the lawn on the prints. Amanda liked lingerie, lace and silk, so no one would see it under her loose clothes. Her hair was a bit of a mess. They did not want to be braided into braids, which were destined to form a curl on her head. The relations of the image was completed by glasses with neutral glasses without dioptrias. She had bought them for a masquerade party at the university a long time ago. Now they came in handy again, were satisfied with the fitting. Amanda put her camouflage ammunition into a large bag and went to collect her specialized books with much more pleasure. While her patient was resting, she would read everything about autism in more detail. You don't just start treatment from scratch. You need a sober, rational approach to everything. At 800 this morning, as promised by Carl, Amanda's doorbell rang with a smiling guy. "Time, I'm Andrew. Let me take your things to the car. The chief has asked you to check everything thoroughly for any forgotten items. You won't be able to leave for 3 months." Amanda felt so warm and relaxed by his words, she thought we'd work together. "I'll do everything I can to make it work." The journey to her new home took just over 3 hours without traffic. The train station is 2 kilometers away. As if Andrew had read her mute question, there are 6 cars in the garage, 2 drivers. Anything that needs to be bought and brought in, you'll leave it to me. Amanda looked curiously around the majestic, but very pretty house of gentle sandy color with brown original elements of decor on the facade, balconies, a large terrace. The building stood surrounded by parkland, with a large outdoor swimming pool visible in the distance. Now covered with some kind of protective material, the smooth alleys were lined with neat clean tiles, a scattering of coniferous trees. One of the paths was framed with birch trees. The rose garden was wrapped in a film. On the other side of the house, there are some outbuildings resembling small greenhouses. Everywhere boxwood shrubbery, green even in this late autumn. Some exotic, with thick emerald-colored leaves. It's all guard lined up on the porch. "Welcome to our home." These are the words of a tall, formidable woman with a mop of bright red hair. "My name is Vanessa. I'm the housekeeper, like Carlson's Friedenbach, and I'm also the cook." The woman smiled a wide, kind smile and held out a large, soft, warm palm to Amanda. "This fellow with the rake is my son, Ashley. He's a bit of a handyman out of boredom, but his favorite is the garden. It's his domain." And Vanessa continued, "Have you met Andrew?" The other driver's name is William. The only one left is our maid Gabriella. Her mum's Spanish. That's where the name came from. Amanda was stared at with 2 large brown eyes by a young lady with a form that was overemphasized by her work clothes. Amanda only had time to think when a tall, elderly man with a noble appearance appeared on the doorstep. She would have addressed him as Your Majesty, or at least Your Graces or Your Lordship before. Gray, piercing eyes, a short hedgehog of gray hair, regal posture, broad shoulders, pleasant timbre of voice. "Amanda, I am Carl. Gabriella will show you to your room and give you a tour of the house and courtyard. Make yourself comfortable." Our Vanessa will bring the meal schedule to your attention. I expect you in my office in 2 hours for a chat. If it satisfies me, I'll introduce you to my daughter Elizabeth." He turned and disappeared into the house. Ashley picked up Amanda's luggage. Gabriella made an inviting gesture to follow her, and only Vanessa smiled reassuringly at her. "We have lunch at 2:00 p.m. Late arrivals will not be tolerated by the host. Then we'll get to know each other better. Now you have more important things to do without me." Amanda followed Gabriella through the house and hardly listened to the maid's peaceful mutterings. She was impressed by her room with its separate bathroom and toilet, its huge windows overlooking the garden, its elegant yet homely atmosphere. She did not know yet how her life in this house would turn out, but she was already eager to make herself useful, and Amanda's relationship with her foster parents was normal. But whether it was modern trends that influenced them, or whether her interests were very different from those of the older generation, they rarely saw each other. Communication was reduced to routine phone calls like, "Hey, daughter, how are you? Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine with us too," as the dialogue usually ended, or was reduced to discussing another talk show on TV or gossip about the neighbors in the yard. It was stifling for Amanda in such a boring framework. To see each other was for her birthday, to drop by with presents before New Year's Eve. But to tell her father and mother how difficult and lonely it was for her in this world of people was out of the question. She's an adult, independent, a cutoff piece. She had not formed with her guardians that special soulful closeness, when one for all and all for one. The older generation did not understand her choice of profession, but moving to a flat, leaving on her own, approved. Adopted daughter stopped chasing them for the empty time spent near the TV in the arms of fried seeds, without attempts to develop intelligence. Different blood, different destinies, on different paths rushing. In this large, beautiful dwelling, Amanda felt in her gut some kind of unity between the household. She had not been here for half an hour yet, and she already wanted to stay for a long time. Tired of the long monologue, Gabriella led her to the door of Carl's study at the end of her tour of the building and garden, and "I don't like ceremonies and antimonies. We'll be rubbing our sides against each other all day long. Don't barge in on your master, knock first. He doesn't take kindly to familiarity." Amanda nodded, agreeing to the "you" and thanking her for the tips. Gabriella left, swaying her hips gently, and the therapist thought to herself, "There's a reason this nymph is trying so hard. Probably there's an object of her attention in the house, for the sake of which she is constantly in a state of combat readiness to beckon, to envelop with charms, to conquer the heart. Does she have her eye on the master? It's a good thing I took care of my modest appearance beforehand. I will not be so conspicuous to the domestic public as Gabriella deliberately does. They'll have to deal with that themselves. I have other tasks." Amanda knocked firmly on the study door and entered after a shout from her host. Yes, come in. I'm in my office." The office, though still an inexperienced practitioner, but a very strong theorist, liked it at first sight. Furniture made of noble wood, endless shelves with books, elegant statuettes, excellent landscapes and stylish frames on the walls. A desk with a large desktop computer, a music center with speakers in a corner, a separate cabinet with CDs. She didn't know Carl at all yet, but this office seemed to shout out loud, My owner is far from stupid, well-read and educated, intelligent and successful." Carl himself invited her to sit in the soft armchair by the coffee table, not telling her her subordinate place in the room, seating her at the desk opposite him. Ringing the bell, he summoned Gabriella. "Make us a couple of cups of coffee, please, or would you prefer juice or tea?" Amanda gratefully agreed to the coffee. She had been so nervous this morning that she hadn't even had breakfast at home, and now she was afraid that her traitorous stomach would give her away, rumbling loudly at the worst possible moment. Lucky for her, along with coffee, Gabriella had brought a vase of walnut biscuits, a box of chocolates, and a jug of cream. Amanda pounced on the treats like a hungry wolf, but she saw no judgment in Carl's eyes. He liked sincerity and directness in people, even smiled. "We're not welcoming you well. Your first day on the road. They didn't even offer you tea." Amanda tried to say with a full mouth that everything was fine, then smiled helplessly back, wiped the crumbs off her lips, and carefully finished the rest of the biscuits. "You'll have to forgive me. I was nervous, so I went for the sweets. Thanks for the coffee. Nay, let's get back to business." Carl would never admit to his partners or to this young woman that he likes to do his inspections the old-fashioned way. It was an approach he had borrowed from his father, a simple farmer who had spent his life cultivating the land and growing cereal crops. Now his father, unfortunately, was no longer able to work. 5 years ago, Carl had bought a house in the neighboring village where his parents were now living. The older generation flatly refused to move into Carl's mansion, arguing that the land in their vegetable garden was much closer and more interesting to them than the park landscapes of their son's estate. Having a kind-hearted housekeeper, the son stopped persuading them to live together. Now they only went to visit each other and to family holidays. But he remembered his father's instruction that any hired laborer should first be fed heartily, see how he copes with the meal, and then draw conclusions. If a person eats sincerely without greediness and false shyness, he will be good. But if he tells that he is not hungry, takes only a couple of crumbs from the table for decency, he will work so sluggishly. Any qualified recruiter would die with laughter from such a method of personnel selection. But Carl had long ago learnt from his own experience that the method works without fail. After handing Gabriella a tray with empty cups, Amanda's boss started the conversation. "Your candidacy was recommended to me by a professor who sometimes counsels my daughter. Before you begin your duties, I would like to briefly tell you our backstory. Not as a stranger to me yet, but as a therapist, Elizabeth, my wife, and I have a late baby. My spouse passed away a week after she was born. Heart failure. I have an older son, Harry. He lives and works in Europe, in our branch in Prague, and comes here occasionally. Harry was born when my wife and I were very young. Now he is 33 years old. Our student marriage, made by great mutual love, turned out to be very strong. We lived soul to soul, and only one thing upset my chosen one. After the birth of Harry, a series of miscarriages followed. Less else, my wife dreamed of a second child, a girl, even the name of her beforehand in honor of her mother, to whom my wife was infinitely attached. At the age of 44, my wife got pregnant once again, was infinitely happy, but the doctors grabbed their heads. Even the usual examination, which all expectant mothers undergo, revealed a serious arrhythmia. The heart could not cope with the double load. Problems with the work of blood vessels began. Doctors feared that the baby was not getting enough of the nutrients it needed. My wife, almost all the time lying in the clinic, only looked at me pleadingly and asked, "Don't let the doctors terminate this pregnancy. I will take care, fulfill all their appointments. I have to carry this baby to term." Her zeal increased even more after the ultrasound showed that she was carrying a girl. The wife became finally obsessed with the idea that it was heaven that finally took pity on us and was giving us this last chance. My wife bravely endured 9 months of agonizing waiting and an endless series of procedures and injections and surgical intervention in the form of a cesarean section. The neonatologist's verdict was a blow to her. They immediately began to suspect some abnormalities in the girl. A detailed examination showed that she inherited an extremely rare genetic blood disease transmitted through the female line. People with a do not live long, 10-15 years at most. The news broke the wife, shattered everything in her already sick heart. Arrhythmia attacks began to recur with wicked persistence. She never returned home from the hospital. Elizabeth was discharged after 2 months of scrupulous observation. At first, I was desperate, resentful of the little girl for taking away the woman I loved and leaving me alone in the world. He was 17 at that time. I am still amazed that he was a wise adult even then, convinced me that everything was destined by fate, that he too had lost his mom. But it was her life, her dream, and her choice. You won't believe it, but it was he who, together with the nanny, looked after the baby, quickly learned to change her nappies and feed her specialized formula. The second blow was that soon doctors noticed that Elizabeth was different, not like other children. Her genetic disorder had not yet manifested itself, but she drove us crazy by the fact that she did not react to our presence at 6 months, at 1 year, and then. Imagine the picture: the child eats, sleeps, but does not react to us, to a lot of colorful toys around him. The face is like a frozen mask, no vivid facial expressions, no gestures, as you sit or lay down in such a position and will freeze, sometimes for quite a long time. The girl turned out to be pretty, even pretty. Big-eyed, curls of blonde hair, chubby arms and legs, but she behaved like a puppet, like an artificial doll. After a while, she was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, or autism. Doctors assured her that this type of autism spectrum disorder boded well for her prospects. Body functions would be partially developed, but not fully developed. I took Elizabeth to Europe. There, the doctors were able to perform almost a miracle. They removed the sleep disorder, adapted her eating to the right regime, and taught her to react at least a little to what was going on. I came back from Germany almost happy. Elizabeth began to recognize her family, babbled something in a language we didn't know, sometimes tried to express something with gestures, but she still hadn't learned to smile. On the street, she turned around at the noise during walks on a trip to the Black Sea and pushed her legs up when Harry and I tried to bathe her in it. Later, I sent Harry to study in the UK, and as if as a reward for my troubles, my business grew and grew like on yeast, bringing me more and more income. We built this house together with my wife. It was her idea to live away from the hustle and bustle of the city, in the peaceful countryside. The man briefly interrupted his narrative. It was obvious that the story stirred up old memories in him. He looked at his watch, and then looked up a little. There are only 15 minutes left till lunch. The rest you will learn in the process of work. I'll just add the main thing. The autoimmune disease, like a hungry hydra on the hunt, reared its head sharply when Elizabeth entered puberty. Everything was always delayed compared to her peers. So it happened about 2 years ago. At her 14, those former merits of the medical profession began to fade quickly. It seemed that the destruction of cell tissue by her own internal aggressors was causing her brain activity to go to sleep. The few dozen words that she had previously spoken cheerfully were forgotten. She is once again indifferent to what is going on around her. Happy to walk with Vanessa outdoors, even swimming in the pool with Ashley's help. The girl has forgotten all those skills. More and more often, she won't let herself get out of bed, now moves only in a wheelchair, eats almost nothing, loses weight. I realize, Amanda, that you're not a miracle worker or a god. The doctors have already told me that the girl has no more than a year to live. The deterioration of her fragile body is progressing. For myself, I have labeled your tasks as facilitating her departure to the next world. I know it's impossible, but I still dream of her smiling when she looks at our park, our home, the sky, and the sun. I guess I want too much from you. Amanda was in shock. No, not at the task set before her. Here she would do everything she could, apply all her knowledge. There was such pain and despair in the man's eyes. He spoke so courageously about his daughter's imminent departure from this world that the visiting therapist's blood ran cold. So much for the high fence, the rich house, and the walls of which for so many years trouble has lived at ease. Despite the pleasant faces of the people who built it, the lunch was gorgeous. Vanessa cooked so deliciously that Amanda didn't even notice that she ate all of it. She reached for some very unusual salad, and several people answered her mute question about where Elizabeth was. Elizabeth is having lunch in her room, said Carl. We'll go to meet her after dinner. Mate, he says. I've already made her favorite meatballs and mashed potatoes, Vanessa added. And I picked a bunch of brightly colored September berries behind the house. I think Elizabeth is excited by their sharp autumn scent. Only Gabby, Elizabeth's father, had called the maid that once in a conversation in the study, and Amanda had picked up the nickname mentally, so shorter and much simpler ate, staring intently at her plate. She seemed to care the least, if at all, about Elizabeth's plight. We'll have to keep an eye on this smashing person, Amanda decided to herself. She's prepared my room perfectly, no complaints. But did she make any insinuations about her patient? In dealing with an autistic patient, all means are good, and all little things can be global. After these words, everyone at the table was again distracted by sweet cakes and compote. Amanda thought to herself, through her grief, dreams, and thoughts, it's good, here they have a soul. The servants dine at the same table with the master. Everyone is praying for the girl as best they can, all trying to brighten her life. Her thoughts were interrupted by Carl's voice. Amanda, are you ready to see your patient? The woman replied enthusiastically that she was looking forward to it, and she was not the least bit wrong. The curtains were drawn in Elizabeth's room. It was dark, and there was a kind of gloom and despair. Amanda immediately noted to herself that this had to change. It was understandable. A seriously ill person lived here, but it was not worth emphasizing it with decorations. The girl did not react to their appearance. At that moment, Vanessa brought a tray with Amanda's favorite dishes. The therapist decided not to put her work on hold. Carl, Vanessa, let me feed Elizabeth, and we'll have a chat. Leave us alone. Elizabeth is your new doctor, Amanda. She'll be with you almost nonstop. You don't mind if we leave you two alone, do you? Again, there was no visible reaction. The girl obediently opened her mouth at the sight of food, chewing and swallowing like a puppet. But Amanda began her monologue. "I'm not a doctor or a carer for you, Elizabeth. I prefer the status of friend. I'll be there for you of my own free will, even though I'm an employee. I'll tell you the truth, I'd stay with you for free, as long as I like it very much. Your wonderful house, the place, the people, you. Tomorrow you and I are going to turn your room upside down. I don't think it will be bad for your health." For a split second, Amanda thought there was a flicker of something in the girl's eyes, some glimmer of reaction, but it all went out again very quickly, and it could have been the insidious play of light and shadow in the room at all. The doctor, under a shower, decided to think about it in her room later, but in the meantime she dressed her ward in warm clothes and took her in her pram to the courtyard to breathe the strong air of golden autumn. From that moment on, the days in the house followed a long-established pattern. In the morning, Amanda and Elizabeth had breakfast together in the girls' room. Then there were the inevitable drips and injections to combat the manifestations of genetic malfunctions. The obligatory 2-hour walk in the garden, where Ashley always lovingly tended the plants. Lunch in the great hall. At this meal, Amanda would spend time with the household and then feed Elizabeth. The patient's therapeutic sleep, a new batch of medication dripping steadily through the IV for a couple of hours at a time. Dinner, now in the presence of Carl, who on weekdays was always at work, and in the evenings and weekends worked hard at home in his office. Exhausted by the endless procedures, the patient fell into a deep sleep as early as 10 o'clock in the evening. Amanda studied the works of colleagues related to autism again and again. There were no changes in terms of closer contact with her ward, neither for the worse nor for the better. The girl's condition remained stable. Amanda talked to Elizabeth about everything, told her about the plot of her favorite fiction books, read her poems, showed her reproductions of paintings from a large colorful album. Or rather, the word talking is not appropriate here at all. The doctor conducted her eternal monologue, and the girl listened to it indifferently. The other day, already beginning to despair, a little doctor found in one of the foreign articles information that to level the manifestations of isolation with autism for patients can be a good help to communicate with the animal world. For some reason, there were no pets in Carl's house. After a general meeting of all the residents of the mansion, it was decided to get a puppy of a large dog. Most of all, for some reason, everyone liked a Canadian Newfoundland. 2 days later, Andrew brought a shaggy black treasure with stormy eyes from a kennel breeding this particular breed. He was irresistible. It is commonly believed that our lesser brothers have no intelligence. What told Tim then that the full name Timothy, and not some Bax or Lord, was so much nicer, that he was meant for Elizabeth. Finding himself in her room as a guest, the place had long since been on Amanda's errand, a more racy setting with lots of brightly colored elements. Tim headed straight for the girl and rubbed his wet nose into her palm. The doctor was sure there was a flicker of reaction in Elizabeth's eyes, lightning fast, but she had no doubt, bright and positive. For the first time, Amanda felt they were on the right track. By New Year's Eve and Christmas, everyone in the house was expecting Harry from Prague. Amanda didn't know the young man. She only remembered Vanessa's words. "He's golden." Elizabeth transforms when her big brother arrives. She can't smile, but here it's like her face lights up. Gabriella, who was present during their conversation, added, "And what a handsome man Harry is. Respectable, decent, wise, but at the same time outwardly a typical example of Hollywood hero lover. 2 characters in one person, it's so intriguing." Vanessa immediately echoed her words. "Oh, Gabriella, go change Elizabeth's bedclothes. While she and Amanda are out for a walk. You've got Cupid's days on your mind, you're not the right girl. Roll your lips." Gaby, wiggling her hips as usual, walked away, and the cook gave her a shrug and said to Amanda, "The girl goes completely off the rails when the owner's son flies home from Europe, making eyes at him, and he looks at her like she's nothing. He had a bride, but she cheated on her husband while he was earning money in the Czech Republic. They ran away, although the foolish young lady was begging us, shedding tears, just that the hair on her head did not tear in despair that she missed a rich party. It didn't help. Harry couldn't trust her at all, couldn't forgive her for seeing another man at the same time." Sighing sorrowfully, Vanessa suddenly suggested, "Come to my room tonight, and we'll have a tea party. I'll tell you my story, how Carl saved me from trouble, and why I've since nicknamed him the Angel of Goodness." On the walk, Amanda and Ashley discussed raising a new pet. It wasn't right for a pedigree dog to go pear-shucking in the yard. The gardener had told her he'd always wanted a dog. He patiently put up with Tim's antics, even forgave him for ramming a rose bush wrapped in cling film into the yard on the run. Amanda again thought that Elizabeth, sitting in the wheelchair, made some movement in the direction of the mischievous Newfoundlander, but she was in no hurry to express her assumptions aloud. We must watch and watch and watch again and again. There would be seen. After supper, when she was satisfied that Elizabeth had fallen into a restful sleep, she closed her door firmly and knocked on the next door. "Come in, I've been waiting. I've made us some green tea with molasses and gooseberry jam and nuts. Now we'll have a feast." Oksana had been in the chef's room only briefly before, but now she could examine the room in more detail. The same elegance and home coziness, spiced with personal things dear to her heart. There were many framed photographs on the wall, Carl and his wife still very young, Elizabeth in various angles, Ashley in the garden, then near the gazebo, then by the pool, a handsome young man on horseback. That's our Harry. A handsome man. Gabriella doesn't mince words. God grant him personal happiness. He's like his father in business. He should have children of his own, and he's still traveling abroad. I realize he's no monk, but all these windy girlfriends aren't what he needs for marriage. He'll make a marvelous father. He loves Elizabeth. Vanessa ate another spoonful of clear amber and emerald gooseberry jam and began her tale. After high school 35 years ago, I trained as a food technologist. Not just any culinary school in New York City. I dreamed of a career as a chef, the kind that would get me Michelin stars for the art of cooking. It didn't work out. The reason for everything was my uncluttered appearance. Height under 1 m, size 42 feet, fullness, bright copper hair, angular movements, lack of taste in the choice of wardrobe. Of course, chefs are not chosen by their clothes, but representatives of the personnel service in all the cafes and restaurants where I tried to get a job after graduation refused me under any plausible pretext. In one prestigious restaurant, only the lady in personnel was honest. Our customers often invite the chef of the dish to the room if they like it. You cannot be a business card of our institution. You're only fit for a place in the circus buffet. I don't say this harshly because I'm cynical, not at all. I like to be honest with the people I hire. It's better that way than looking away shamefacedly and keeping a kook in my pocket. And yet my traveling in agony was one day crowned with success. I was taken to a private cafe Tarina Tamara with authentic Georgian cuisine. The owner is a small, bald Georgian with hooked fingers and crooked legs. He then temporarily dispelled even the myth for me that Caucasian men are always endowed with a sharp Oriental beauty. Curly-haired, black-eyed, daring, this man said without a word of criticism. I have a wife who is ill in a female way. She can't sleep with me, and I am a man. I need to save my physiology. You'll work in the kitchen and visit me a couple of times a week. If you do well, I'll make you head chef, and then maybe chief. I, from his words at first, in a precipitate fell out, said that I would think about it, and then I calculated in the Institute 6 years at the correspondence department. Before that, 2 years as an assistant cook in the canteen. I am not today, so tomorrow 26 years old will be. And I'm still wearing girls. There's no cue for my red-headed soul. No one even looked at me with that enveloping male gaze full of desire. Ever. Blushing and pale, 2 days later informed that I agreed to all the terms. The owner of Tsarina Tamara glared at me, invited me to the back room. There I learnt the basics of love between crates of vegetables, herbs and boxes of vodka, which in decanters was later passed off as cha-cha. It's a shame. It's a shame. Come on. Big physiological love on a quick hand honestly lasted between me and the chief for 1.5 years. And then I got pregnant, having learnt the news. My lover was not ceremonious, dismissed in no time. He kept bemoaning that I shouldn't talk, that his wife shouldn't know anything. He has 3 grown-up children. They'll see who he's staring at. The family will laugh. He paid me 3 months' salary in advance and washed his paternal hands of me. About the fact that the baby should be born, I informed him not immediately. All the time delayed, I felt that this news will not turn out well. With my general fullness, belly became noticeable only in the 6th or 7th month. Just before the usual official maternity leave, I found myself on the street. My rent ran out 2 weeks before Ashley was born. All I had was an aunt in a remote village. I can't even tell you how close we are. I'd never seen my father before. My mother drank herself to death when I was 20. She was homeless at first, and then she went missing. But I never doubted for a second that the baby would be. I'm alone in this world, and this will be my own blood. The landlady of my flat is not a kind-hearted person, but she took pity, waited until I gave birth and discharged from the maternity hospital. She gave me a month to do everything, and then she put up with it for free. And then her children came to live with her. They had nowhere to live, so she showed me the door. We went with a 1-month-old baby to grieve. We stayed a week in a shabby hotel, but my son was restless. The noise insulation in the building was shitty. Other guests began to complain that we did not let them sleep at night. We moved out to nowhere. I'm sitting at the intercity bus stop with my stuff and Ashley's bundle. I thought I'd go to the countryside, see if I could find an abandoned house. I had enough money in my purse for a week's existence. When an expensive dark Jeep pulled up next to the bus stop, I didn't even immediately realize that the driver was asking me what I had. I sat there in tears. And it was him. At that time, the house in these parts built a house, looking for a local specialized shop that recently erected on the highway. I gave him the address, why not, but he didn't leave at once. Later, he told me that my eyes were like those of a beaten dog, and there was so much desperation in them that he couldn't resist asking. "Woman, why are you sitting in the wind with a baby? I can give you a lift somewhere, even if it's in the other direction." I don't know how it happened, but I told him all my troubles in 2 words, as if I were in the wind. He chuckled and thought about it for a few minutes, then asked, "A professional cook, you say?" "I'm looking for such a specialist. I need to feed 2 teams of workers every day. We can provide you with a boxcar for accommodation." Of course, I didn't hesitate for a second. It was getting late, and the bus was delayed, so I was going to sleep in the field with Ashley, right on the dead grass. I gathered up my few belongings and climbed into the warmth of the car. There was no fear or apprehension. I was used to the work, and I loved my craft. Vanessa interrupted her long story and poured her and Amanda another cup of fragrant tea. She brought from the kitchen a dish of ruddy cakes left over from dinner and glanced briefly at Amanda. "Have I bored you with my tales yet, Doctor?" "Not at all, Vanessa. It's rare for anyone to talk to me so heartily to confide their secrets to me. I am very grateful to you for this frankness." "Then I will continue," said the woman. Then everything was much more pleasant. Guy's workers met me as a mother, starved on dry meat, and I with a move them borscht boiled on a brain bone, cooked cutlets, wheat porridge in a cast iron steamed with butter. When they brought to the table in compote, the foreman could not stand it. "You cook deliciously, Vanessa. We haven't seen such delicacies here for a long time. Therefore, guys, I will order the following. We have 15 people working here. It's hard to feed that many without a well-equipped kitchen. So we'll distribute the daily duty. Who of the men will help with wood for the stove, who will carry water, who will help the cook with other hard work. She's got a little boy in her arms. He needs to be fed and nursed. So have a conscience, brothers. Don't sit on this young woman's neck, and don't offend her in word or deed." That's how I found myself in our yard about 30 years ago, when it was still under construction. Ashley is my native gold, having grown up here. After the building was finished, I stayed in the house with the owners, Carl and his wife and Harry's little boy at the time. Oh, what a table I made for their housewarming party. The guests could only wonder where he'd found such a cook. There were various people in the house, high-ranking and with connections. Many times they tried to lure me to other houses. How could they do such a thing? An angel of goodness from heaven appeared to me one autumn evening at a bus stop, and I'd betray him when others beckoned. Elizabeth was born to me, her nannies and carers, and Carl made me head of the house and promoted me to housekeeper. Everyone here has become dear to me. Even that empty Gabriella with her dreams of hunting Carl's son doesn't seem like an enemy. That's my story for you, Amanda. Maybe it will help you in your work. Amanda went to her room pensive. She used to trust the notion that the rich were stingy with their souls. In Carl's house, she saw a different world, full of warmth, respect, and a willingness to help each other through the difficult realities of life. Her fervent conviction to do everything she could to make Elizabeth feel at least a little better became even stronger in her mind. From the next day, she increased the therapeutic load for the girl, insisted on the return of massage procedures, deciding that they were not harmful to the body, broken by the disease, and on the contrary, contribute to its tone. Elizabeth was still unresponsive to the change in regime. Only the appearance of Timothy's shaggy puppy seemed to revitalize her face a little. Amanda didn't give up. She wheeled her pram around the park and sat Elizabeth down to watch Ashley's dog. He took the assignment seriously. Little Tim already knew the commands: sit, down, place, come, walk. In the house, the Newfoundland recognized only two people as masters: Elizabeth, at whose feet he spent all his free time, and Ashley, who fed and brought him up. The days were running by, and the winter holidays, New Year's Eve and Christmas, everyone's favorite, were approaching. Amanda, Gaby, and Vanessa were happy to decorate the already pretty house with fir tree arrangements, colorful wreaths, and sculptures of fairy tale characters. Ashley installed artificial Christmas trees in all the rooms, richly decorated with expensive toys. Everyone was in a pre-holiday mood. 3 days before New Year's Eve, Amanda received an unexpected phone call from her only close friend. "Amanda, you're going to fall over. I have big news. I'm getting hastily married and moving to Florida with my lover. He's a military engineer. We're going to live near the Cape Canaveral spaceport." Amanda was instantly sad. With Olivia, they were like sisters almost, since the orphanage together, always supported each other, and now they were going to be separated. Meanwhile, her friend continued to chatter into the phone. "On the 30th of December, I have a farewell bachelorette party in a nightclub. On the 2nd of January, we have a one-way flight. No cancellations. Amanda, I've prepared a present for you for the road. I've made an evening dress. It's amazing. It's not worthy of your beauty, but it'll set it off beautifully." If Olivia could see me now, she would die laughing, thought the nurse. Recently, she had overheard Gaby's remarks about her. The maid gave her a scornful look after dinner and summarized. "Our therapist is a moth-pale mouse gray. How only the earth bears such shapeless, faceless women. They're worthless, and men probably avoid such a scarecrow a mile away." Amanda promised Olivia to call back by nightfall and went to Elizabeth's room. The girl, after a hearty dinner, a walk before, was already fast asleep, sprawled out on the soft pillows. After adjusting the blanket, she slipped out into the corridor. The conversation with Carl was not going to be easy. At her timid knock on the door of the study, the owner responded at once. "Come in. I've just finished going through the evening's papers." "Is something the matter?" "I had an emergency." She outlined the situation in a nutshell, but I'll accept whatever you decide. "The fact is, someone close to me is going away for a long time. We won't get a chance to see each other if I can't make it to my friend's appointment. I'm not a warden in prison or a cousin in the zone to keep you locked up, Amanda. You've been in our house for a month and a half without leave." Elizabeth is doing well, if not brilliantly, without a hint of deterioration. "I am pleased with your initiatives, methods, and practical experiments. None of them have been detrimental to my sick daughter. Be sure to go to the city. I'll give you 24 hours. On the 31st of December, after 8 p.m., you must return to these walls." Amanda didn't leave his office. She flew out on wings. Vanessa was in the kitchen, and the released nurse couldn't help but share her news with her. "I'm ugly," Amanda said, "but everyone wants a bit of colorful holiday. And when I get to see my Olivia again." "You're ugly?" She smiled back at the cook. "Save the fairy tales for others, my dear. All your masquerades won't fool me, a clever old lady who has lived in this world. I've long guessed that you hide your beauty under a dull image, wearing glasses. Don't you worry, this secret stays between us. If you're doing this, you must have a good reason. Your profession doesn't get in the way of all this cross-dressing, and my business is my business." Amanda turned round at a run, rushed back into the kitchen and hugged the cookery master warmly and tenderly. "I know two angels of kindness in this house already. Vanessa, your kindness and willingness to understand and accept is in no way inferior to your host's graciousness." She gave Vanessa an embarrassed peck on her lush cheek, smelling of vanilla and apples, and rushed off to call Olivia to cheer her up with the news. Considering that Olivia worked as a fashion designer in one of the city's attires, the dress for Amanda turned out to be luxurious. Soft, tight silk of dark blue color emphasized every curve of the graceful figure, while not forgetting all the proper charms and roundness, the neckline, and the slit on the leg in the very point and measure. A string of pearls, a bracelet and earrings that her adoptive parents gave her on her 25th birthday, exactly in tone and in the general style of the outfit. As she dressed her friend in one of the changing booths in the atelier, Olivia froze with admiration. "Amanda, you are going to be a goddess this evening. And your fiancé, I'm sure he won't waver. He's already seen you in our shared photos. But the rest of the male sex will be at your feet, you'll see." "Oh, I'd rather stay away from all these signs of intrusive male attention." Amanda replied bitterly, "I've had enough sad experiences in this area. It seems to me that decent, if not knights, at least adequate gentlemen are no longer in this world. I have only come across representatives who managed to disappoint me for a long time. I'm going home to my flat to fix my hair and nails and stuff. I'll meet you at the club tonight." The place called Big City Lights met Amanda, who arrived by taxi with a stunningly colorful appearance. Dressed up fir trees and pine trees, colored lights and tinsel shining in their light, the crowd dressed to the hilt. Her favorite friend Olivia was wrong. There were many real beauties on the dance floor, at the tables, at the bar, worthy to become the prima donnas of this evening and the coming night. On the eve of the new year, it seemed that everyone tried not to hit in the dirt face. The audience was already relaxed by the fountain of hot drinks. Amanda breathed a sigh of relief. No one around her cared about her, but she was glad too soon. At one of the tables, Mason was having a good time with his friends. Her first and only man. At the sight of Amanda relaxed and chatting serenely with Olivia and the rest of the girls, a greedy gleam lit up in the man's eyes. And that girl just got even more beautiful. I shouldn't have let that bird out of the love cage back then. Such a friend next to me will make the image of any successful man, he thought to himself, lewdly grinning. Today again I will get her into bed. Deciding to give his victim at least one drink to make her more agreeable, Mason returned to his company, but kept Amanda in his sights. After about an hour, Mason ran out of patience. He decided to go and teach the wayward babe a lesson by humiliating her in front of her friends. Amanda suddenly appeared behind him with a banal greeting. "I see what people are like without a bodyguard. Do you want me to protect your gorgeous body from the claims of other men?" Amanda jerked away from Mason in surprise. But she didn't want to spoil Olivia's wonderful evening, so she quickly got up from the table and led Mason away from the bar. "What do you want? You and I dotted all the I's and T's a long time ago. Go back to whoever you're spending the night with and leave me alone." But it wasn't so easy to stop the smarmy bastard. He wasn't about to give up his intentions to sleep with such a lovely woman again. "Come on, Amanda. Let's have a nice glass of red wine to this chance encounter and part as friends. I didn't mean to piss you off. I just thought you might have something to remember from the pages of our brief affair." The woman prudently decided not to make a scandal because of casual circumstances and obediently followed the man. At the counter, Mason ordered 2 glasses of some expensive grape wine and from an overseas collection, generously bought a chocolate bar and nuts sprinkled with sugar. He put his arm round Amanda's waist. The man's calculation was trivial, that now his old acquaintance would get drunk and become more docile, but he was wrong. Amanda drained her wine glass without even tasting it and looked boldly into her ex-lover's eyes. "Am I free of you now? Is the ritual honored?" Mason was not accustomed to such behavior of ladies. He had never been refused, so he began to whisper in her ear. "This is not the end of our New Year's Eve date, my dear. Don't get your hopes up. I'm going to rent a private office, and you're going to be gentle with me. I remember everything, my lovely." Here we go again. Amanda thought with annoyance. Why is it that when a man is around, all his desires are always reduced to one thing? She looked around helplessly. There was no one around except a young man calmly sipping whiskey at the counter. And their eyes met. And what did the stranger read? But he slid valiantly off the bar stool and approached them. "This woman is here with me. I only stepped away from the table for a short while, and you, young man, immediately took advantage of my absence." Mason's eyes widened in surprise. "What kind of businessman are you? Where did you come from?" Amanda remembered the rest of it as if in a nightmare. The man who'd come to her rescue had lifted Mason off the floor like a feather and given him a solid slap on the wrist. But the bitchy, temper tantrum-hardened man didn't calm down. Before retreating from the battlefield, he grabbed his unfinished glass of red wine and splashed the brightly colored liquid directly onto Amanda's dress. A huge maroon stain instantly spread across the silk. The woman turned pale, and her unexpected knight grabbed her by the arm and dragged her to the bathroom. On the way, he said something about washing the cloth quickly. then there would be no trace left. Amanda was worried about something else entirely. No one had ever stood up for her before in her life. Suddenly, on some impulse, she threw her arms around the man's neck and dragged him with her to the club's exit, stopping only for a moment at the cloakroom to retrieve his coat. "I've got a car. I have an appointment here with an old friend, but he's running late." But Amanda didn't listen to him. As in a dream, she dragged the newly disembarked passengers along the cold autumn street to the car with checkers. She didn't care about propriety, about her ruined outfit, about the surprise of her companion who followed her obediently. There was only one single thought in her head. How good it is that I like to wear expensive silk linen. It won't be embarrassing. In her flat, where she had brought a random knight from the club. She pounced on the man like a tigress, like a ravenous March cat. And he didn't fight back. Everything that happened between them was like being in the Garden of Eden. The body sang, the soul rejoiced, the thoughts danced the can-can. How tired I am of being well-mannered and decent. Let it all be a one-time thing. I don't even know his name, though my casual lover is obviously handsome and not stupid. Of the latter, she was somehow sure, though they hadn't said a word to each other. In the morning, they fell asleep together without breaking their embrace, but Amanda woke up alone. Apart from the crumpled bed and a pillow that still smelled of a man's perfume, there was nothing in her flat that reminded her of the night before. She brewed coffee, pulled out her shoebox stash to buy Christmas presents for everyone in Carl's house. She was beginning to think of all these people as family. And the night, what could she do about it? That it had come to an end. All New Year's Eve magic comes to an end at some point. Gone was Father Christmas, having rid her of the vile mason. It's just a pity she didn't even feed the stranger breakfast, though the fridge is empty, and there's no bread, not even a slice. But she can make delicious pancakes. Okay, flour, sugar, vanilla, milk. There's a block of frozen butter in the freezer. But dream away. She needs to get back to her chores. Amanda went back to her fancy dress of a simpleton fool, packed her bag and rang Andrew. Carl's driver had promised to take her shopping for presents and get her back to the manor by the appointed time. Amanda suddenly thought that the man she had spent this magical night with was also an angel of goodness and protection, at least for her personally. Her mood was twofold: sadness at the separation and something unfulfilled, and joy that such fireworks had happened in her rather bland life. At Carl's house, she and Andrew were there at 8 p.m. sharp, like clockwork. On the doorstep, Amanda was held up by Ashley and Tim. The gardener, embarrassed, handed her a bouquet made of spruce paws with pine cones and boughs of glittery sprinkles. Gabriella appeared on the porch, painted today, apparently in honor of New Year's Eve, in all the colors of the rainbow. Colored mascara, eyeliner, shadow, blush, lipstick. Strangely, with the maid's naturally good looks, it didn't even spoil her. "Why, Ashley, you've been flaunting your attentions all over the place, and you said you loved me to the grave. Are your feelings," she misspelled the word, "faded already? Have you switched to our doctor?" The modest, quiet, ordinary gardener suddenly decided to fight back. "I haven't had time to give you my simple gift yet, but don't touch Amanda. Don't you dare even speak to her in a disrespectful manner. You're not worth a fingernail." Gabriella gave Ashley a scornful glance and sang back, "Shut up already, you gardening scarecrow. You're not the one I'm waiting here for. Harry should be here soon. The man's no match for you. Learn from him what a man with a capital letter looks and acts like." Amanda took Ashley's arm and led her away from him to interrupt the unpleasant monologue. "You don't listen to her filthy words, Ashley. A man who can love plants and animals so well, it's like he's an extension of them on this earth. Some of us become an angel of kindness to others, heals and saves lost, unhappy souls. And someone becomes a kind of shepherd, guide, conductor for flora and fauna, protects it from human cruelty, uses people for good, not spoiling, sparing, wisely. You are one of such angels of goodness for Mother Nature. Be proud of such an exceptional status. You have earned it." Amanda pecked the confused Ashley on the cheek and walked up the stairs. In the distance, she heard the sound of a car approaching the house, but she was already running to her ward. It was New Year's Eve, and Elizabeth wasn't ready. Vanessa had her hands full with the table. Everything was sparkling and glittering in the decorated hall. The table was bursting with food and drink, and all the family was dressed up. Even Amanda had changed her shapeless jumper for a white blouse with lace and a black skirt. The only things left in place were the wispy curl on her head and the funny glasses on the bridge of her nose. Carl came to the table in a soft cashmere pullover and loose light-colored trousers. Vanessa had little gold tinsel bows on her head and in her apron. Gabriella wore a provocative purple dress with a low neckline and a deep cutout on the back. It was the way the dishes were served to the table. In her chair sat a rather plain Elizabeth wearing a delicate violet-colored dress. Amanda had done her hair. The girl looked refreshed. At her feet, as usual, lay the faithful guard Timothy. Ashley had specially washed him with dog shampoo for the holiday. His coat was shiny and even silvery in places. Amanda had already handed out presents to everyone, little Christmas decorations depicting angels in various outfits. All of them, if you shook them a little, made a melodious chime. We started to sit down at the table at 22 in the evening. We had to see off the old year, thank it for all the good things, and ask it to take the bad things with it. Carl went out to hurry his son, and soon they were in the hall together. Amanda was just taking a sip of orange juice when the man she had spent tonight with appeared in front of Elizabeth and her. She even caught the end of the sentence. "I'm sorry, Father, I was late. There were unforeseen circumstances. And then I also had to reschedule an important business meeting that had canceled yesterday." Amanda choked up and blinked her eyes, frightened. And then a miracle happened in front of everyone. There was no other word for it. Elizabeth became animated, reached out to her brother, and then made a gesture towards the floor and inarticulately said, "My youth." Everyone was stunned, rushed to brace and hugged the girl. Amanda slipped quietly from the table in the midst of the commotion. Let her relatives stay together. Without her, no one would notice her absence. And she needed to recover from the unexpected shock of discovery. The man of her dreams, her mysterious night visitor, and Carl's son were one and the same person. She was shaking all over with confusion. At the table, it was soon discovered that Elizabeth's carer and her doctor, who had brought such a joyous event to the house, had gone somewhere. Harry was sent in search of her, and he knocked insistently on the door of the house physician, then opened it a little, but found nothing in the room but the sound of water running in the bath. Deciding that the woman might have been taken ill, the man pushed the bathroom door resolutely open. Above the bathtub, bent over, Amanda was furiously rubbing some kind of cloth, dropping tears into the water. She turned round at the noise of the door opening. She wasn't wearing her ugly glasses now. Her hair was loose down her back, and Harry caught a glimpse of something very familiar about her. Then he moved his eyes to the bathtub where a beautiful dark blue silk dress lay. The puzzle came together. You? Harry shrieked in surprise, and I came back with champagne, provisions, a bouquet of flowers to your flat, but it was empty. I almost went mad with despair. I thought I'd lost my night fairy forever. Amanda boldly stepped into his open arms. To hell with all principles, decency, rules. This man had turned her soul upside down yesterday. People on this earth meet and get to know each other in different ways. She feels good with him. The rest doesn't matter. Harry let the girl out first. Quickly put something on. It's only 5 minutes until the chimes strike. We'll make it in time. There was no time for the usual masquerade. Amanda's blouse and skirt were all wet. She pulled on her tight jeans and white jumper in a matter of seconds. Didn't bother to brush her hair. They arrived at the table as the chimes struck. Champagne bubbles were playing in the glasses. Vanessa's culinary creations were waiting on the table. Even Elizabeth tried to put a semblance of a smile on her face. Carl did not ask his son a single question, only glanced at the young people seated at the table next to him. Vanessa thought to herself, and with that, we'll soon have children's voices in our house again. Ashley smiled happily, stroking Tim's back. Gabriella was biting her lip nervously and chewing on a red fish sandwich. So I'll have Ashley stolen from me soon enough if I'm catching crows. Now I'll have to accept the gardener's advances if I'm to stay in this house and get more of a foothold. He's not a bad chap, he's kind and handy, and quite handsome. The New Year's Eve night was truly fairy tale and magical, just as it should have been. Everyone at the table was happy in his own way. The long-awaited winter holidays flew by in the midst of entertainment and rest. Only Amanda worked tirelessly with Elizabeth to consolidate her success. On his first day at work, Carl realized that he had relaxed too much over the weekend and decided to be home early. Quietly stepping on the soft carpeted walkway, he walked to the door of his daughter's room and witnessed Elizabeth's new victories. "Nuff, Tima," Daddy, Harry, Vanessa, Ashley, Amanda. Gaby Elizabeth dutifully repeated the syllables after Amanda. Carl rounded the corner of the corridor and cried. A panel appointed by Amanda's teacher 10 days later gave a reassuring summary the disease had subsided. The process of cell and tissue destruction had slowed down. The remission period had already exceeded all known scientific limits. Carl, I told you Amanda is an excellent specialist. In our case, expecting a full recovery is a bit of a stretch. But your daughter has shown marked improvement in her general condition. She's starting to react to the outside world. Weakly, not much, but she's starting to talk again. You know, I was thinking, if the patient lives surrounded by angels of goodness, as my student characterized it to me, he has every chance to stay on this earth for some more time, and you will make him as happy as possible for her. I am sure of it. 6 months have passed. The plane leaving on the morning flight to Prague was delayed due to weather conditions. The cute young couple kept glancing at the electronic board and at each other. Harry, what if I hadn't gone to that ill-fated nightclub then? You would have seen me in the image of a monster and would not pay attention to me, asked the mum-to-be, with a rather noticeable rounded tummy. Come on. The man answered her, adjusting his wedding ring on his finger. I would have seen you through all your disguises. Your angelic soul, your ability to do good cannot be hidden. I'd fall for such radiant magic. The iron, monotonous voice of the announcer announced the boarding of their flight. The couple hugged each other and slowly walked towards the boarding point. We will finish all my business in Prague now. You will see this beautiful city and we will hurry to our home. Elizabeth, do you know what she gave me before we left? Harry, Amanda, Elizabeth, Tim is waiting. It's a puzzle. We can't let them all down. Without us, the circle of good angels would be incomplete.